Community College Institutional Advisory Council on Friday, May 10th. And if we could begin by doing a roll call, I would appreciate it. Present.
Councilmember Espada. Councilmember Myersdorf.
Present.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Kamuri.
Here.
Councilmember Dave.
Never seen it do that.
Councilmember Hutter.
Here.
Councilmember Meadows.
Here.
Councilmember Nagin.
Yes.
Present.
Councilmember North.
Present.
Councilmember Reed. Absent today. Councilmember Thurman.
Here.
And Councilmember Woodring. Absent. House Vice Council. Is
Holly.
Meadows today?
Yes. Don't like me.
Acting Senate Chair Mike Holmes.
Here.
For students.
Rachel Holderried, I'm a proxy for at CD Vasquez.
And NFA Julie Newey.
Present.
We do have a quorum.
Thank you. I would like to take this opportunity to recognize Regent Carol Del Carlo and Vice Chancellor Crystal Abba for being with us today. Thank you for joining us today. We'll move on to agenda item number 2, public comment. Public comment will be taken during this agenda item. No action may be taken on a matter raised under this item until the matter is included on an agenda as an item on which action can be taken. Excuse me. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes per person. Persons making comment will be asked to begin by stating their name for the record and to spell their last name. The council chair may elect to allow additional public comment on a specific agenda item when that agenda item is being considered. Do we have anyone here that would like to make public comment? Hearing none, is there anyone on the phone that has joined the meeting by phone today? Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item number 3. I would like to have new members and new people attending to take a few minutes to introduce yourself and explain your connection to TMCC. So, do we have members that are joining us for the first time today?
I wonder if we just go around the room and
Okay.
have people, and also where they work.
Right. So, why don't we just go ahead for the benefit of all of the members? Go ahead and have introductions around the room so that everyone knows who's joined us today.
My name is Rachel Holderried. I am a student government senator from this year and re-elected for next year.
Welcome. Thanks for joining.
Holly Madole, Classified Council Secretary.
Mike Holmes, Professor, Construction and Design, and currently the Faculty Senate Chair here at TMCC.
Julie Muley, Coordinator of the Dental Assisting Program and NFA Representative.
Joe Nannini, Director of Clinical Experiences and Assessment at the College of Education at UNR.
John Madole, I guess I'm the construction representative.
Marisa Brown, Workforce and Clinical Services Director at the Nevada Hospital Association.
Holly Hutter, Chairman, Click Bond, a manufacturer in Carson City, Nevada.
DJ North, Executive Vice President and Chief Banking Officer for Plymouth Bank.
And I'm Nancy McCormick, Senior Vice President for Retention, Expansion, and Workforce Development for EDON, the Economic Development Authority of Western Nevada.
And Karen Hilgerson, President of TMCC.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Deborah Byersdorf, the Chief Academic Officer for Washoe County School District.
Good morning. Sesh Komori, Professor of Electrical and Biomedical Engineering at UNR.
John Thurman with Nevada Works. We're the Workforce Development Board for the 13 counties of northern Nevada.
Good morning. Nate McKinnon, Vice Chancellor for Community Colleges.
Crystal Abba, Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs.
I'm Theo Meek, the Research Scholar for the Nevada System of Higher Education.
Good morning. I'm Carol Del Carlo, Regent.
Welcome. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 4, I would like to have a motion to review and approval of the minutes from the November 9th, 2018 IAC meeting.
For the record, John Thurman, I would move to accept the minutes as presented.
We have a motion to approve. All in favor, say aye. I'm sorry, do we have a second?
Second.
Holly Hutter, thank you very much. Motion has been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. The motion has been approved. We'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is an update from the legislative session. Dr. Carl Dalpy will be joining us. Congratulations first on your new position as the Vice President of Instruction and Institutional Effectiveness at WNC. We certainly are sorry to see you leave TMCC, but we know you'll do great things there, and we wish you great success in your new role. So, Dr. Dalpy, you have this copy of this presentation should be in your package on your table.
Good. All right. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Kyle Dalpy, formerly Dean of Tech Sciences here at the Edison facility, currently Interim Executive Director of Legislative Affairs at NCHE, and then moving into, as the chair noted, thank you for those kind words, Vice President of Instruction at WNC July 1. Here today to give you a legislative update, which I'm going to tell you, by the time this meeting's over, it's going to have changed because there's so many things in motion. A lot of stuff when I submitted this last week has changed, so I'm going to read a little bit off script. But let's go ahead and get started, keep you on track. I think we have exactly 26 days left till June 3rd. The session runs 120 days, straight through weekends if needed, holidays, evenings, etc. The items you see on the board are the makeup of the Assembly and the Senate as we started. It's changed a little bit because there's been some unfortunate losses. There's been some shuffling of people. Mostly the Republican Democratic numbers have stayed the same because they'll replace people with the same party usually. We started out tracking about 180 bills. Some of those have died at the NG level. And again, my current job this session, because I've been in front of you a lot in the past, talking from a TMCC perspective, is actually the entire system representing all 8 institutions, the 7 teaching institutions and the Desert Research Institute. So the number of bills is quite a bit that we watch. We watch everything from Water Start for DRI to Promise Scholarship for community colleges and then all of our budgets. There's the schools there. Again, a quick reminder, if you're not familiar with, which I'm sure you are, the NCHE overall strategic plan, access, success, closing the achievement gap, workforce, and research. These are, again, demographic type slides. This is the entire system, about 107,000 students across all the institutions, all 7 teaching institutions. Numbers have gone up. Now they're currently up in most places. So what we spend a lot of time talking about at the session, there's kind of like three buckets of what we talk about at a system level, and it affects the community colleges, affects all of higher education, it affects the community colleges a little bit differently than universities. We spend a lot of time talking about our budget requests. That's the biggest thing that everybody talks about, and that's why last night, there's all the scheduled budget closings for next week have come out, most of which include NCHE. So we look at the budgets, we put together, the process goes, the year before the session, the schools, colleges put a budget together. They hand it off to the system office. The system office packages it. The Board of Regents approve a budget request. The budget request goes to the governor. The governor puts certain things in the budget. Maybe puts it all in there. Maybe doesn't put any of it in there. Usually it's a split. And then we spend the session making sure that the stuff that is in the budget stays. Things that are not in the budget maybe we get, and we don't lose anything. So it's one of those where it's not always what you get by being at the legislature for 120 days, but it's a little bit about what you could lose if you're not there, which is why sometimes I'm like this because I'm not there today, right? Because who knows what's going on. So one of the big ones is our funding formula. Funding formula is the base funding. It's weighted student credit hours. Students in the classroom were funded at a level that's equal across the teaching institutions. And what we've asked for, I'm not going to go through the details on this, you can see it in your packet, is tied to completion. So students in the class, weighted student credit hours, finish the semester, they complete with a letter grade, which includes an F, because sometimes an earned F is more work than an earned A for instructors. We want to get funded for that at the same level, and then any additional funds for caseload growth. Question?
So my question relates to the third bullet, because it is true that the reimbursement rate is the same for all 7 institutions. However, it's also true that for upper division and graduate programs, there is a multiplier factor added. So for example, the CTE work that we do here for manufacturing, we get the 156.01 times 4 for every credit that's completed. If I'm in upper division at UNR, the factor could be from 2 to 4, and if I'm in graduate school, it goes as high as 8.8. So the reimbursement rate is sort of the same, but every different department, lower division, upper division, graduate school has a factor, which means if I'm enrolled in a 3-credit dissertation class, that could be, the state might give my department $3,900 for that class, depending on what, if I pass those three credits. And so can you,
Yeah.
I think that's really important for this board to
I'm going to
understand.
give a little bit, and then I'm going to look over here to our
Okay.
vice chancellors, because they live and
Right.
breathe it a little bit deeper. But
Yeah.
at the base level, the weighting part of it is there's a weighting of 1. At 1 weighting for a class. If the class is weighted at a 1, and that's defined in a table.
Right.
It's the $156.01 or whatever that number is. It's $156 per that 1. So English 101 at UNR, English 101 at TMCC, it's a weighting of 1. So the schools get the same dollar amount for that. As you move up in from 100, 200, 300, 400 level, those numbers jump. So the 300 levels will be a weighting of generally 3, which would be 3 times that. And some of that, of course, the doctoral programs are only offered at the university, so they would not be in reach of the community colleges. So the weighting affects it, the dollar amount comes in, because programs are either upper division or considered more costly to run, like the AIT programs in this building. Did you guys want to add anything on that?
You don't press anything. Crystal Abba, I was going to say for the record, Vice Chancellor for Academic Student Affairs. So I was here during the funding formula study, and there is a history to this, and I will tell you that that decision on the part of the legislature, because this is the legislature's funding formula, was very conscious. So what they did was there were 2 factors that led to these deviations in terms of the disparity, because what Dr. Hilgerson is representing is a disparity. The first reason is as class sizes go up or go down, essentially there was an adjustment made there based on a cost analysis. So all of the weights are based on relative cost in terms of course size. The second piece, and this is really more important, I think, is the fact that the legislature made a conscious decision that the university weighting get a 10% adjustment for their research mission. So again, a conscious decision on the part of the legislature, because this is not our funding formula. This is the funding formula that is owned and maintained and agreed to upon by the state legislature.
And it does, and the funding formula is its own 3-hour lecture. But it does work in the way that Vice Chancellor Abbott just mentioned. So I'm going to jump to the slide here that shows the initiatives on the screen. This is the NCHE budget asks to the governor. The items that are bolded are what are currently in the governor's recommended budget. So the caseload growth, that means if a school had an increase in enrollment, they would get more funding based on that weighted student credit hour, the 2-year comparison from fiscal year to fiscal year. So that right there represents $21 million each of the next 2 years of the biennium. Capacity building, which I'll defer to President Hilgerson if she wants to chime in a second on what the piece was. Each institution was asked to put together projects that support students' access and success, primarily success and completion, that sort of thing. That's framed under our capacity building, and that is $18 million and $22 million in each of the next 2 years. That is currently in the governor's recommended budget. And TMCC had on there, I want to say dual credit.
Well, we're focusing on advising, tutoring, supplemental tutoring instruction. So ours is a little bit different because we focused on wraparound student services, perhaps a bit more than the other campuses did.
Okay,
So-
and that's good, because the idea
Yeah.
is that the completions, which is the retention services, are the ones that get funded and students are successful, which is the ultimate goal of why we're here, to get them to be successful one way or the other. Summer funding, which we asked for in 1 year, which would mean, for those of you who don't know, we are not funded in the summer, so we do not receive a state appropriation in the summer terms for anything except nursing. So we were asking for a certain grouping of codes, some of which are in this building for applied tech, would get funded in the summer in order to maintain operations without having to do a make or break, because there would be a state appropriation there. That was not included in the governor's budget. It's one of those things that is not like, it's not there because everybody hated it. They were like, it's a great idea, we just don't have enough money, so it's not in there. The performance pool piece, this was an ask that we could have the performance pool And I might have to ask Nate or Crystal for backup on this one. If I'm not mistaken, this was to make the performance pool, which is a 20% carve out now, included in our funding, not something we have to go and do every couple years because everybody hits those numbers. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
This actually was a separate pool to support the goals. So it was separate money that was intended to be used. In some respects, the discussion was related to faculty compensation and in dealing with the compression. So really then we would have had, assuming they phased out the old performance pool, which is a carve out from the base, this is kind of separate.
This would be like an add-on almost. Yeah.
Yes.
So right now we get 80% of our funding comes out of that weighted student credit hour, 20% is out of the performance pool indicators, which every school has made with the 1-2 year average. So that becomes paperwork, and then we were saying if there's something else we could do on top of it to make it true performance, like a bonus almost if you hit a certain number.
So Kyle, what's alive and what's dead?
The bold are alive.
Pardon me?
The bold. The ones that are bold.
Okay, thank you.
Formula, capacity, and then UNLV, those are the ones that are included in the governor's budget. I'm going to go through 3 slides, and I'll pick up pace here a little bit. Those are the ones that are currently in motion right now in the governor's recommended budget. Our budget closing is set for next Tuesday, so we will know if everything stays as we expect.
Yeah, May 14th, 8 a.m.
Caseload growth, you can see here where the numbers go based on enrollment. That's in your packet. I won't go through it, but it's based on enrollment growth from FY16 to FY18, or loss if there's a negative. Capacity building, here's the number I mentioned on capacity. Here's the detail for it. So it's in your packet if you want to look at it. And again, as the president mentioned, there's different things going on in each group, and TMCC is up there as well. So if the capacity goes through, TMCC will get $1.7 million in the first year, $2.25 in the second year to support those initiatives mentioned. Summer school funding, this is what the breakdown would have been. Again, that's not currently in the budget. Performance pool. Several different things. Vice Chancellor Abba mentioned it. The compression, we put together an ask for help solve the compression from the salary structures from the recession, where we're bringing in new people almost $10,000, $15,000 more than existing staff. And no increases there. We've got 3 rounds of pay reductions. This was not funded. It cocomes out of the interim study, AB 202. We're still looking at that, but it's not anything that's on the table right now for solving a compression issue and adjusting salaries system-wide. There was also a series of enhancements put forward. Everything on the board right now was requested. Only the top item was included in the governor's recommended budget. So the prison education program that started at CSN has a little bit of something going on at WNC, but we'll ramp it up there. And then TMCC will expand on prison ed. Actually got funded at a little bit of a higher rate than we requested as one of the governor's initiatives. Question?
May I go back, please, Nancy McCormick, relative to the previous slide, the faculty staff compensation. So I'm just curious about the conversations about how difficult it is to find and keep qualified teachers, professors, especially in some of the more advanced, very competitive industries such as robotics and coding and whatnot, and how those discussions are going about how to equip education to be able to compete against, the wages that they could make out in the industry.
So it is definitely driven by discipline. Like you mentioned, there are several positions. We're having worked in this building for 3 years. We had 100% turnover in advanced manufacturing because they were stolen away to industry. We stole some back. But actually starting salaries, getting that to work on with our HR department based on experience, trying to get them up. Certain fields, in particular nursing, and now I'm pretty sure we've classified advanced manufacturing in that realm, are considered like a hot industry. So there's a little bit of differentials there. We can put more money to it because we won't keep people. They'll come in and they'll leave, or we won't even find people. I mean, we run a search for advanced manufacturing here, and there's like a handful of applicants that just show you how hot the market is. It's not necessarily, no offense to any other side of academics. There are more people to teach core humanities, history, and English, so it's not that way on those disciplines, but on the high the ones that are really driving the economy right now, it is difficult. So there is some things you can do there, but it is still, you really need to find somebody with a passion who wants to be in the classroom. And then there's other things we can do with the contract because they'll be teaching overloads most likely because we won't be able to find part-timers, so there's other money there, but they're working for it. So.
Understood. Thank you.
Capital improvement projects. So this is kind of a clunky process the state uses to do buildings, make build state infrastructure. Again, there's three board-approved items. They're on the construction. The bolds are the ones that are in the governor's recommended budget. There's 7 under the planning, which for the way the sequencing works, if you get planning dollars, you can plan for a biennium, and then you can either run with the plans and build something, or you can come back the next biennium and work on trying to get it into the construction phase and get funded. And it seems like we're a long ways out, and we are. I mean, this is a long time to build a building, but we'll start, next spring talking about the next biennium. So you get like 6 months off, and then you start over again. Currently, right now, the only construction that's funded in State Public Works Board budget for NSHE is the Nevada State Education Building, and then the CSN Health and Sciences Center building. Those 2 buildings, that's the only thing that's in the governor's budget right now. The rest of the items up here were board approved, our Board of Regents, but are not in the governor's budget. And you guys had the DRI Center, I think, was one of the ones in there. So options for moving forward, if it's not, I don't expect anything to show up in the budget and say we're going to now fund this, so move forward with private dollars. I'm looking at Gretchen, private dollars, and then move forward and put initiatives forward if the college still wants to do that.
Fund it. That's nothing.
Is that the end of it?
Small request.
Okay. So prison ed is one of those that we're going to expand, and I'm not familiar intimately with how TMCC is going to do that. It started at CSN. It'll be expanded to TMCC and WNC going into the next biennium. Do you want to say anything on prison ed?
So we are currently doing a very successful program with a small number of inmates, mostly re-entry inmates. So they're in transitional housing, getting ready to re-enter society. And then we're doing some limited elements of, it's called the JIVE program, Justice-Involved Vocational Education. And then we're doing some limited number of JIVE workshops at the county prison. I had a wonderful meeting yesterday with Sheriff Balaam, and Camille Vega, who's been the real inspiration behind our programs, joined us for part of that meeting. And so we're looking to really expand inmate education in a way that will ideally reduce recidivism. I believe that I'm struggling with the dollar amount we got. I want to say we're in this bucket, I think we're about $115,000 a year. So it will help. I think that I hope I'm recalling that correctly. So I think we'll be able to do more with those monies. But Dr. Sesh pointed us to another opportunity this morning that is exciting in terms of grants. We do need a lot more grant funding to really scale up some of these programs.
Yeah, it's about right on the dollar amount for you.
Yeah.
So all the projects we described, the 2 capital projects, the caseload, the capacity. We didn't talk much about UNLV Med School because it won't affect TMCC that much. It's such a pipeline of people there. If you get into that world, were all the items that were passed by our Board of Regents and put forward. There are a number of other items we watch at the legislature, so we'll go through those real quick if you have questions. The ones that are in bold are the ones that are currently active and in governor's recommended budget. Every year we have to, every other year we go and support the treasurer in the ask for money for the Millennium Scholarship Program, which community colleges students get at a rate of $40 per credit. So that's a $33 million to keep that program going. The Silver State Opportunity Grant, that's a $10 million for need-based. So the Millennium is merit-based high school graduates. Silver State Opportunity Grant is need-based. Again, it shows up as a line item, and then we go and support it. Our Vice Chancellor spent a lot of time talking about these. The Promise Program, which is the last dollar free community college, started last session, is again going in this year. We're trying to look for reauthorization of that. It's currently in the budget at $4.5 million. We're trying to, we really need more of the, $6.4 million to make it work with all the numbers because it's so popular. So we're trying to get that number moved up a little bit. And then the one that came up this session, the Promise Reconnect, is a free community college at the class level of 3 credits for anybody other than high school students. And currently, because of the cost of that, if you imagine everybody at the community colleges getting 1 class free, the cost of that won't be, probably, it's on its way. It won't get funded. That's why it's not bold, although it's still there being discussed a little bit. Do you guys want to add anything on the programs? Good? Okay. Other interests, so I kind of blocked these based on categories. There's governance, there's Assembly Joint Resolution 5, which will take the Board of Regents as a separate entity out of the Constitution and put it within the executive branch. That has passed both houses. That'll go to the voters in fall of 2020 as a ballot initiative to change the Constitution. You have a regent here who could speak to it, I guess.
That gesture sort of speaks for itself.
I just did. I just spoke to it.
There will be one of those ballot, pros, cons kind of thing that go into the ballots. You get a little bit of depth on that. Senate Bill 354 is about changing the regents from 13 to 9 to the hybrid board of 5 elected and 4 appointed. That is still traveling through the second house right now. It's on the assembly side. Under workforce and research, we have the WIN funds, the workforce in the new Nevada, which we have gotten quite a bit, multi-million dollars in this building alone over TMCC over the last couple of years. That is currently up for a hearing at 6 o'clock next Wednesday, along with the Knowledge Fund, which is the similar piece that the competitive grant for universities and the Research Institute for doing research. So GOED, the Governor's Office of Economic Development, holds these two funding sources, and they disperse them kind of through it is a grant, you have to apply for it. But the majority of the WIN funds come to community colleges, the knowledge funds go to the universities and the research institute.
So Kyle, can you tell us where you think that one's at?
Well, I don't know where that one's at, that's the problem. So they closed all of the GOED budgets except these two, which I found interesting because these are the two that primarily, with the exception of, I know we had some conversations on the private schools, there's a couple private entities that have gotten some funds under WIN, but the majority of this money comes to
Let me ask the question a different way. In your conversations with individual legislators, are you sensing that they understand and appreciate how important the WIN funds are to two-year colleges in Nevada?
Yes.
Okay.
They've heard a number of stories from students. One of the tricks here, though, is that this is currently funded, the WIN funds for the next biennium are currently in the governor's recommended budget at 50% what they were the last.
And that amount is $8 million down to 4. Right.
And GOED right now already has enough commitments to use all that money. So, with projects that are rolling for next time. So it's going to be a hit if it doesn't come through. I put a bill up there, AB 32, Assembly Bill 32, which would give GOED the opportunity to roll funds from one biennium to the next, which they currently don't have. So they currently have to expend by June 30. If that bill goes through and the WIN funds are funded, that would allow another $1 million to roll over for the next biennium. So it's one of those that, we're going to see what happens on Wednesday, because Tuesday's our budget closing. And all of our budgets will close unless they keep something open, but most likely they will close everything. And on Wednesday, they're going to close these two. All of that affects NSHE. So when you ask me where is it, yes, they hear the information on students saying these are great programs. I wouldn't have been able to go to school without it. I mean, I worked in this building for almost 3 years with the ability to say, if anybody wants to do any program in advanced manufacturing, we can pay for it. And it's through the WIN fund. So we got people through. That's very valuable. Knowledge funds, the DRI is showing every dollar of knowledge funds they get, they turn it into 4 in other research dollars and a $9 return on investment overall. So they hear all that, but when I look at, they didn't close those two, and we're both next week, I see possibly some trading and maneuvering going on. So we'll see.
If I could add, just for the record, in addition to impacting the community colleges and impacting students, as a representative of economic development, I have to, for the record, add the impact to the companies and the employers that have really educated a whole lot of workers over the past 2 years in these programs that have been funded by WIN, and they're taking people that had no background whatsoever really in manufacturing technology in particular, and now these people that have gone to work for the Gigafactory and others, not only are they contributing to those entities, but what we're hearing is that those students who are choosing not to stay working out at the Gigafactory or at the Industrial Center are now filtering back into the community. And so they're very much appreciated by the other manufacturers in the region who 2 years ago didn't have this pool that at least now has that basic experience from their certificate course from the manufacturing technician, as well as having 1 or 2 years potentially of experience. And so from an employer standpoint, it really makes a difference. So I'm just curious, have employers been taking part, an active role down at the legislature to reinforce the benefit of the WIN grants?
Because the funds were created to support workforce training back in 2015, whenever the Tesla legislative special session for that. I think there's an appetite now to maybe let employers take care of themselves a little bit more, because even if everything went through as is right now, it will not have the same impact as it did last biennium, because the numbers are smaller. I mean, the dollar amounts are smaller.
So Kyle, I think I heard you say that the WIN funds will receive a hearing Wednesday at 6 p.m. And I just want to mention that if you need some testimony, I'm sure that some of us here would be happy to testify, or maybe request that others who are, I'm thinking of Mike Kazmierski, who might be very helpful in this regard to testify. So
I would say if any student or employer wants to testify, those would be the ones I'd say first, and then because they're the end user. We're the pathway for them, but they're the ones who are that's the lives that are changed through the businesses that are.
I was thinking about EDON as,
I think EDON's already.
Oh, fantastic.
I'm not sure if it's scheduled or not.
Yeah, okay.
This just got scheduled yesterday.
Okay, thank you.
Going to salary.
I'm sorry, do we have another question?
I have one more question. So there's another way, if somebody can't show up, there's an opportunity for them to submit testimony, correct?
Correct. So I can leave some cards and I can facilitate that, or you can just go online and submit it to either Senate Finance or Assembly Ways and Means. The bills, you can do a drop down. Like if you've had a particular bill, there's a site where you can drop down AB 32, I want to support it, and drop some things in, but the budget you have to submit directly to the committee. I'm going to speed up just a little bit. I'm almost at the end here. So salary compression, I've talked about that a little bit. There's no funding for that. We went in with a little bit of a request, and it did not make governor's budget. Senate Bill 214, which came out of the interim study, AB 202 on affordability, had to do with giving the Board of Regents the ability to create a step system within the non-classified employees, so faculty, administrative faculty, professional employees. The Board of Regents can do that now. That's kind of the argument we heard, is why do we need to legislate it? The problem is if the Board of Regents do it, which they can't fund it. So the funding is the piece you don't want to go back to the legislature in 2 years saying, we put this in place, it's going to cost $30 million, because then they're going to say, okay, where do you want to take that $30 million from? There's no new $30 million, so, or whatever it costs. So that's what we were pushing for. So it's currently dead, but the language may come back, but I'm pretty sure that one's dead for now. Collective bargaining, Senate Bill 135 is classified employees. Senate Bill 459 is everyone else. They're both still alive. They're in the second houses. No hearings scheduled, so we don't know where that'll be on that. And then there's several bills on prevailing wage, which for those of you who don't follow that as closely, right now, prevailing wage law dictates that a state agency can pay 90% of prevailing wage. That was a change back in 2015. It affects projects that are $250,000 or more. All the legislation you see up on there is going to move that back to 100% and is going to lower that threshold from $250,000 to $100,000. We don't take a position on that. That has to do with how construction is done in the state, with the exception that if you take it from 98 to 100 and you lower the threshold, there's going to be dollars up there and it's going to cost some money. So every one of these bills, we put forward a fiscal note and say it's going to cost us this, it's going to cost us that, just for awareness, as do other public entities. But you may hear some chatter on that. Okay. That's it. Actually, so if you have any questions now, this came out last week, so the budget hearings we have coming up in the next week. Tuesday is the NC budget closing, the 14th. The president will be there, I'm sure, with leadership. They're going to close all of the NC budgets unless they decide to leave one open. The 15th is the GO-ED, which will be the WIN and the knowledge funds. That's in the evening. The 20th is the capital improvement projects, which those two projects that I mentioned, CSN and NSC, will be on that. There is a long shot. Somebody may say, hey, I want to pay for this for TMCC, but it's very slim. Anything else new is going to come into play. If you've read the papers, they're saying the Economic Forum, which came out May 1st, projected a little bit more money. We're talking $40 million. That's not even a drop in the bucket. When they're talking about $211 million is lost in this K-12 discussion in Clark County. and now they're talking about they could put 100 million more in play if they don't sunset the taxes that are set to go down on June 30, which there was just a ruling saying they don't need a 2/3, not a ruling, there was an opinion from legal counsel and LCB that they don't need a 2/3 vote to override. But I think that's going to end up in the courts in the next couple weeks because that's a big deal. They'll have to have one Republican cross over to vote for it to keep the taxes from sunsetting, which would put $100 million more into play for the budget. So that's kind of everything that's happened in the last 48 hours, and it's still, if you have any questions, let me know. But if you want to read out, you'll see the stuff online, especially in the Nevada Independent, which is down there full force covering everything legislative related. And it closes June 30, the whole session, hopefully. We don't go extra, so the next 2 weeks are kind of key for budgets. So,
Do we have any questions before we move on to another agenda item for Dr. Delpy? Great, thank you for your time and energy put in down at the legislature. We appreciate it. Thank you. We have a request to rearrange the agenda item, so at this point in time, we would like to move agenda item number 9, the presentation discussion for the proposed NISHI co-requisite and college-ready gateway policy revision. So we will then go back to items number 6, 7, and 8. Dr. Hilgerson is going to be starting this presentation, and she'll be followed by Vice Chancellor of Academic and Student Affairs, Crystal Abba.
Okay, so good morning again. So first of all, I want to extend a thanks to, again, Crystal and Theo for being here on behalf of NSHE. I think what we hope to share with you today is a very well-rounded presentation related to a policy draft that is moving to and through the NSHE system. And at the June Board of Regents meeting, the Board of Regents will be asked to vote on the policy draft. And so today, we want to talk to you, and this is definitely a team presentation, we want to speak with you about how the policy in the latest draft that is now being circulated among administrators and faculty, how that would look should it unfold at TMCC. And we also have a recommendation that we think that there are elements of the NSHE policy draft that are fantastic and well-intended. And we think it will have a significant positive impact on probably 60% of our students. However, we do have a serious concern, and you'll hear about that concern today. The hope is that in this stage of discovery, in this stage where we take the time to research, plan, and think through how a policy is actually implemented in practice, that this is the time where we share and uncover some of the hiccups, the trouble spots, so that hopefully in June we have a very well-informed board, and should a vote on a policy pass, we have a policy that can also be very practical and very effective and successful. So with that, we have several of us doing bits and pieces of this presentation based on our expertise, and we will start with Dr. Marie Mergelot.
Thank you. For the record, Marie Mergelot, Vice President of Academic Affairs, Truckee Meadows Community College. Let me first provide a little bit of context. Overall, Nevada's level of education attainment for post-secondary. Yes?
Yeah, you need to speak up.
Use your outside voice, Marie.
Use my lecture voice, huh?
Yes.
Okay. I said what I'd like to do is provide some context. Overall, Nevada's level of educational attainment is low for post-secondary. At this point in time, we are ranked, depending on the study you look at, around 44th in the nation. Some of our high school graduates still need remediation, but so do a large number of our students who are non-traditional learners. Some who stop out for a short period of time. They come to us, they take a semester's worth of classes, and their work schedules change. So they stop out, and then they come back. And we have others who have stopped out for decades, maybe. Maybe they've raised a family. Maybe they already have a degree and they're coming in to reskill. So, we have this different need because all of our students aren't straight out of high school coming to us. And if we look at the K-12 system in Nevada, it is one of the lowest per pupil funded in the nation. So the assumption that high schools can remediate for these 24, 34, 44-year-olds coming back is really going to be a challenge. So yes, for TMCC, remediation is an issue. But even with the challenges of underprepared students, TMCC has made excellent achievements in student success. In a moment, we'll look at some data relating to graduation rates, but I also want to point out to you that snazzy little logo right there in the bottom right corner. That is the Aspen recognition that TMCC has been recognized by the Aspen Institute as one of the top 150 community colleges in the nation. That's in the top 14–15% of all community colleges in the nation. And we're actually the only Nevada community college that has earned that recognition. So, you know, we've done some excellent work also in closing the achievement gap. We have our Hispanic student population outperforming our other populations. So we have a lot to be proud of, but we still have a lot to achieve. And we do acknowledge that traditional remediation is not working. So over the past couple of years, we've undertaken a number of innovative programs. In relation to the NSHE Gateway Initiative, as of March 15th, we've increased our first-year enrollment in math to 80.9% and in English to 86%. We're really proud of that achievement. Some of the other innovative programs are included on the slide up here, and Dean Ellsworth will be discussing those in more detail. The co-requisite model, you know, as President Hilgersom stated, you know, it will improve the achievement scores for a large section of our learners who are at high school level and above. We are concerned about those students who test in below high school level, those students who are at what we call the 80 level. And what the modification we'd like to see, which is a minor modification, is to allow those students to have a choice. If we have a co-requisite model, but we also have a number of standalone remedial classes for those people below the high school level, it will allow them to choose to have the option of going into the co-requisite class or the standalone class at that lowest level. We feel that this better reflects what a community college is, what that comprehensive community college is. And if we look at the NSHE 2005 Master Plan, which I'd like to mention was actually revisited in 2016 and once again ratified. I know you all know how to read, and I hate to read slides to you, but I just think that this first part is really important, so I'd like to read it. With an open door admission policy, and that's something that sets us apart from our university counterparts. We have an open door admission policy. These institutions will emphasize opportunities for all Nevadans to gain access to quality education. In fulfillment of the community college mission, these institutions offer remedial and developmental education, general education, workforce development, vocational and technical training, and associate's degrees that provide seamless transfer to state colleges and universities. And in some cases, under specific criteria, the institutions may offer selected niche baccalaureate degrees. So this is our mission. This is what a comprehensive community college is. Now to take a look at, take a look at some of the data. What we're looking at there in the blue are graduation rates based on the IPEDS cohort. Your IPEDS cohort is your full-time, first-time degree-seeking student. That first time is one of the things that catches up our numbers. Our iPads cohort is under 1,000, yet we have 11,000 students. So it's a small piece of the pie. But when we look at that pie, which is excellent for comparing colleges to colleges across the nation because it uses the same data sets, you can see that TMCC is actually above the national standard, and it is higher than any of the other community two-year institutions in the state of Nevada. When we're looking at the other numbers here, the Gateway cohort, that is first-time full and part-time degree seeking. Once again, it's a small slice of the pie. It leaves out that other 1,000+ students who are not those first-time students. And you could see that, it does show that we're lagging a bit there, but, it neglects to reflect our entire student population. So to go into the co-requisite model and take a look at more depth into some of the things that we're doing, I'd like to invite Dean Ellsworth.
Thank you, Marie. Hi, I'm Julie Ellsworth, Dean of Sciences at TMCC, and math and pre-developmental and developmental math are under my purview. So to give you an idea of what the co-rec model is, it's very familiar to some here, might not be familiar to others. It's the idea of linking two courses together in a single semester. So the traditional model is you do your prerequisite, maybe that's basic algebra, and then Math 95, and then you would follow up with your liberal arts college level Math 120. The co-rec model is to put those two together in one semester, and so if you're a liberal arts major, you place into this college level Math 120, and there would be extra support along the way so that to fill in the knowledge gaps that you have in order to get through that college level course. So if you're a STEM or business major, you have a different math pathway. You'd be wanting to go for Math 126, which is the pathway toward calculus, and that co-rec model would look like the secondary or the advanced algebra, Math 96, co-rect with a 126 in the same semester to segue those students through. Okay, so that's the basic idea. And then in terms of benefits, next slide, please. This could be a whole presentation, and it will be. So we have folks from INCHI who will talk about the statistics and the successes that other institutions are finding. And really the reason why we're talking about this today is that it shows great promise, and we agree with that, and we believe in getting students to finish their gateway and continue on their education as quickly as possible. And so I will leave sort of the thunder for a little later in terms of the benefits of co-rec. Really the concern, as has been mentioned, is for those lowest students, the students who aren't yet ready for Math 95. So these are the students who place in our skill center, and they are at the arithmetic level. And so we have concerns for these students about whether or not the co-rec model is the best option for them. And so we will, I'll turn it over to Dr. Hilgerson to talk a little bit about outcomes for co-rec.
So I offered to do the part that's a little bit controversial. I'm taking one for the team here, right? But I do want to reiterate something that Dean Dr. Julie Ellsworth just mentioned, and that is that for a pretty significant number of our students, the benefits of the co-requisite model are really good. And so, and I think that theme needs to be restated, that the TMCC is certainly in favor of significantly expanding co-requisites, and it does help to have a board approval to supporting that model so that then we can mandate it and we can blame regents when our students complain about being enrolled in a 5-credit math class, because that is what some students will do. They will say, you want me to do what? I'm a part-time student. I was only going to take 9 credits, and you want me to take 5 or 6 credits of math in my first semester? I wanted to take an art class, right? And the short answer is, yeah, we are going to do that. We think it's in your best long-term interest to do that from the standpoint of what our region needs, okay? So there are a number of benefits that are happening in other states. The data is still a bit unclear. It's not, there's definitely, every state is doing a little bit differently, which means it's very difficult to compare apples to apples. But there is definitely some good data coming out. Now, here's the data that is not so good. And by the way, I have to apologize. We accidentally put in one of the wrong graphs here, and I'll explain that in a moment. But when we first heard about this policy, we heard about good results coming from Tennessee. And so immediately, my team leapt into action to find out what was going on in Tennessee, because as a president, my primary job is planning, my secondary job is planning, and my third job is planning. Planning, planning, planning. Because in education, there are so many complicated pieces that have to come together, Deborah knows, right? And then you need the funding. Even if you have the complicated pieces, then you need to figure out how to pay for it. That 2 years isn't enough for a large-scale initiative. You need more like 3. So we leapt into action. One of the things that we discovered about Tennessee, which made us pause, is that in their pilot study, and that's the pie graph, 34% of their students failed both. 34%. That was a significant number. Approximately 2,198 students failed both. We believe, and we began emailing Tennessee and talking to Tennessee, and it became clear in these communications that the reason those students failed both is they weren't ready for Math 95 or Math 96. That those are the 1,200 students per year at TMCC that we get. 8% of them are veterans. You might hear this repeated a couple of times today. About 45% of them are from underrepresented populations, such as Latino, Latinas, the biggest group in that. And we're worried that those are the students, if we put them in a whole rec model that's connected to a college level course, they'll do exactly what they did in Tennessee, which is fail. And we think we can do better. We really do. The other nice to know, but not have to know, is that Tennessee's overall graduation rate, which you don't see here, that's the chart we forgot, is 52.8%. Or excuse me, not graduation, retention rate. Our retention rate, sorry about that, we're trying to compare apples to apples, is about, I'm looking at 63%. My point is, for TMCC, when we look to Tennessee, we're looking at a college whose results are worse than ours. That's not true for the whole system, however. That's not true for Nevada. But for TMCC, adopting a practice from a college that doesn't do as well as we do by a significant margin also brings us pause, okay? Now that said, NSHE has moved away from Tennessee, and we've begun to look closely at Colorado, which has a better model. Because what Colorado is doing is they say, okay, we're putting everyone in a co-rec. But if within the first couple of weeks of the term, the student says, I'm not ready for this, or the faculty says, you're not ready for this, they put them in a section that they're calling parachute courses. These are 2-credit courses, I believe 2 credit, but don't quote me on that. And they put them in that section, and they start that course the beginning of the 3rd week, so they haven't missed anything. Now, this is a very interesting model, because I think they figured out, uh-oh, this isn't working. Okay, so I think we're on the next slide. Now I want to just talk about from the perspective of planning. And I don't want this to come across as doomsday, because it's not. This is just trying to be realistic and pragmatic about what this will cost us. And the first thing that we did is we worked, Jim New worked closely with the math department. We came up with different scenarios for how we would organize this and what the initial investment would be. In the best case scenario, the initial investment would be about $690,000 approximately, okay? However, that's the initial investment, because if this works, what will happen is by the end of the end of year 3, more students will complete their degrees, which means enrollments will go up a bit for that group, right? And so I would say that even though the initial investment might be about $690,000, probably by about year 3, we're looking at an outlay of maybe $400,000 a year. So it's not as bad as it looks. However, that's making the assumption that we can still help the 1,200 students who aren't testing into 95 and 96 in a different way. Because what some colleges are experiencing with this is their enrollments go down significantly because when those students fail the co-requisite, they simply leave. And that's affecting enrollment in a very negative way. So if we can have a policy that protects that 1,200 students annually, 1,200 annually, if we can do something for them that's really smart, right, then this investment, I think, isn't as bad as it initially looks. By the way, there's nothing wrong with the money. The problem is we don't know where it's coming from yet, okay? We don't know where it's coming from yet. So that's really the issue. And of course, there are impacts on financial aid. If a student flunks 5 credits or 6 credits, they're going to be put on probation, and that's scary for students who might have all kinds of reasons for coming back to college. And then, of course, with any new policy, there are going to be unintended consequences that result from implementation. And that's why my job is leading planning, planning, planning. The more that we can uncover those unintended consequences at the front end, the more effective the policy implementation will be. And that's why we're here today, and that's why we're sharing this work with all of you. Okay, so who's next? Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I should have done that. I can handle that. Hi, I am Ann Flesher. I am the Vice Chair for Truckee Meadows Community College Math Department. And I've been with TMCC and teaching math with them now for about 15 years. And actually have a unique perspective because probably in fall 2014, I piloted our 126E stretch class, which would be now called a co-requisite class. So I have some experience in implementing classes like that, as well as teaching high-level and developmental math. So what I'm going to talk about is a little bit of pathways for both liberal arts students and STEM path students. For liberal arts students, they would be enrolled in, this is again for students that don't meet the cutoff to go straight into a 120 or straight into a 126 class upon enrollment. So one option for students is to take, if you look at the top pink line, they would enrolled in a 5-credit Math 120E class, and it would have a co-requisite of 2 credits of remedial math. And that would be 96A, although really for 120, it would really be our 95 material. And if you're not quite sure, 95 is beginning algebra, 96 is more advanced algebra, and of course, 120 is math for liberal arts, and 126 and higher is pre-calculus on to calculus sequence. So it would elongate the path, though, for lowest scoring students that want to pursue STEM, and we don't want to discourage them from doing that. So with a large number of credits all at once, the pass rate in one attempt could be low, and that, of course, as Dr. Hilgerson mentioned, could be detrimental to some students. And then there are financial and time constraints. Most of our students do come in taking about 9 credits. They take about 3 classes at a time. And then the other, from a pedagogical perspective, our faculty is quite concerned about with those students having such a wide range of math skills and knowledge base in one classroom. Not to say that we aren't now experts in our area and we could adjust to that, but that is a lot to deal with when you have students at very low level struggling with the concept in one area and those that are above that and asking other questions. It can be a lot to manage, and then a lot of times nobody gets anything out of class. The ones that are at the lowest level can't get their questions asked, and the ones at the highest level aren't getting their questions asked. But obviously if the students pass and they're on their way, the co-requisite model works. And I do want to say that from the perspective of the math department, we are embracing this model for those that are ready. I've taught 126, what we called stretch. It would be what co-requisite. It's a very effective class. Its enrollment declined because, again, students didn't want to take 5 credits of math at once. They ended up sort of taking our accelerated versions instead. opting for like 3 credits at once, and then taking maybe another 3 mini or doing a summer into fall to accelerate it, and not taking 5 at once due to scheduling issues and other things. But for those that were successful in my stretch class, and I have some other stories to share, they did great. So it is an effective model. For student B, you can see if they're on a STEM path. If you're on a STEM path, much of what you have to take after, it hinders on your success in 126. So that's a big deal. If they're not successful in that, it is hard for them to then fill their schedule with the classes afterwards, because many of them require 126. So of course we want to effectively get them through that class. And if they don't pass, their schedule is very limited thereafter. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Lisa. So for example, in a 120E class, you might have students that struggle with understanding basic arithmetic and numerical skills. So one question would be 18 is 4% of what number? That is at the lowest level of the student. And then we need to get them to question on the right-hand side, which is actually one of our Math 126 outcome final exam type questions. They have to understand and be able to analyze financial math. They have to be able to compute probability. And we're not just talking about, 4 balls and 3 balls in an urn. We're talking about real probability questions with some depth to them. And then they also have to compute and understand exponential growth and exponential decay and be able to do the computations with that. That involves understanding inverse operations of functions, right? Which is a higher level math thinking, but if you can't do the inverse operations on a numerical level, getting to that higher level in one semester could be difficult without, as I tell my students, I want you to own the math. It's not what I tell you to do. It's what you decide to do after you have absorbed it and put the pieces together. So on the right-hand side is an example of a probability question that involves involves setting up all your scenarios, your tree diagram, and then answering the final question based off of setting up all your pieces. Okay, so we have to get them from there to there in one semester. And then I think this is yours, but I just wanted to share a couple stories with you, actually. So currently, for the past few years, I've taught Calculus 1 and 2, okay? And so what I wanted to let you know is a few years ago, I had a student that completed my Calc 2 class that started out in the Skills Center. And what I have found, and I had another student who completed Calc 2 with me. I think back in maybe fall 16, he was our Math and Chemistry Tutor of the Year. He went on to do an undergraduate research project with DRI and went on to finish geology at UNR. And he started in Math 95. And both of these students slowed down at the beginning, but I'll let you know they accelerated through their classes thereafter. So while the co-requisite model is embraced for some students, they may need to slow down at first. And both of them were able to accelerate through pre-calculus and calculus after. And I'll turn it back over to Julie.
Thank you. So the arithmetic, the skills level is a foundation. And so if we think about ways that we have innovated at TMCC to try to help students build that foundation, we've been trying a variety of things over the past few years. So I'll take you through some of the different options that we have in place now and are starting to see good results in many of these sort of new processes that are available to our students at the moment. So we have a Drills and Skills 1-week review workshop. We put this in place because sometimes students are actually afraid to take the AccuPlacer. They're a returning student. They have fear about coming in for the placement. And so this is designed as a 1-week review. And if it is truly a review and you just need to refresh, you should then have the skills fresh in your mind to place into Math 95 or higher in the AccuPlacer. Then we have the Math Skills Center. So you do not have to test into the Math Skills Center. Any student can come into the Math Skills Center. We have greatly redesigned this to be more of a boot camp to try to get students through it quickly. So it is a 7-week session, 1.5 credits. There are 2 hours a week online lab, and then, or 2 hours a week in-person lab, and then online homework. And based on our previous evidence, that we know that based on our data, if students had 2 hours a week in person for 7 weeks and worked on their own 10 hours a week on the homework, they had an 80% chance of getting through skills. And so the skills is sort of that low credit, work a fair bit on your own option. The CTM is for students at the same level who want more one-on-one with an instructor. This is all in class. There isn't the expectation that they do work on their own online. And then we've had stretch options that are stretching through from the pre-developmental arithmetic level into 95, or the arithmetic level into 95 and 96. And you can see those are higher credit options, 4 and 7 credit options. And we have some students who opt for those. And then our approach to trying to get students through quickly, as Ann mentioned, we had stretch courses, we had co-rec courses. And when I came in 2 years ago as dean, the numbers were like maybe 9 or 10 students were taking those. And they didn't like the option of having that big bucket of credits all on math all at once. And so to try to adapt to them, we set up mini sessions. So you could do your 3 credit 95 in 7 weeks. If you pass that, then your next class could come in the next 7 weeks. Again, it's more days per week, more hours per week, but it would essentially get you through both of those in 1 semester. But you were only signing up for 3 credits at a time in terms of that's what you had to pay, that was your risk involved for those 3 credits, and then 7 weeks later you could move on. And then there are alternate pathway agreements that we have with Washoe County School District where with certain grades and math classes and certain GPA, they can test straight into college level. So to kind of put this in sort of last perspective, sometimes stories can help. And I did want to just share the story of a woman who was one of the first to take the Drills and Skills workshop. So she owns a successful business with her husband, raising 2 girls, never had the opportunity to go to college, a big advocate for higher education, and wanted to be a role model for her girls. So when they got a little older and she had a little bit of time, she came to TMCC. And she was intimidated by taking the test. Where do I start? And I said, try the Drills and Skills. It's 1 week. It'll give you an idea where you're at. She took that and she realized, she said, I really want to build a good foundation. I realize there are gaps in my knowledge. What do I do next? I want to start and I want to build this foundation. She took Skills Center. She passed in the 7 weeks, and she's on target now for finishing Math 95. So she is doing it this step by step. She doesn't have the time, to actually, I asked if she had the option to do a 5 or 6 credit straight into a college level, would she have opted for that option? She said she wouldn't have had the time. It wouldn't have fit, her progression. And so when I tried to describe that to her, she was really set on wanting the good foundation. And she said, it seems like you would be putting me in a situation where I'm trying to build the 2nd floor of a building and I haven't built the 1st floor yet. And so their business is in construction, and that was the analogy she used. And so, again, I really think the co-rec option is great for many students. I am just hoping we can keep the door open for the students who want to do that smaller step stairway toward their success. And that, we can keep some of these options available for those students. And I'm going to hand it over to Estella.
Good, thank you. So what would actually happen to the 1,200 students not ready for 95 each year? So that's about 1,200 students, and you've heard all day, all morning actually, for the last 20 minutes, 30 minutes, that we want just flexibility. So we want to be flexible for those students. I would even add for special programs, especially those targeting minorities. For example, Success First. All of you have heard about Success First. That's one of our 5-star programs. We serve first-generation students. Many of them, I think more than half, are minority students. Many of them are Latino students, and that outpace, a lot of the other cohorts with regards to persistence and graduation. And one of our big focuses for Success First has always been math, because we know that's what our students struggle with. And so we give students a jump start for 95, 96 for those remedial type of programs. We, in addition, about 3 years ago, right, Julie, we started Math Wizards, which really addresses students who are even below that. And 76% actually pursue through this Math Wizards. 76%, that's 26% more than any other cohort in that same category. So one of the things I could tell you, because I'm reflecting back to my own story, I fit in this category. Those 1,200 students, I was a minority. I'm a minority, actually. Not that I was a minority, but I was a migrant child. And so I remember having a gap between high school and college. And so if it wasn't for Carlos Gonzalez, that counselor, I would have never accessed community college. And I started with ESL. I started with math, and I was told many times that I was never going to succeed. And here you have me in front of all of you. And that's why I love the community college. I think one of the reasons I went into this profession was because of the open access, because of our open door. I just reflect and think, oh my God, if it wasn't for that program, for that wraparound program, and for that counselor, what would have happened to me? And that's why I love community college, because of the open access. And I think what we're saying today is just basically we need to continue with that open access. We need to still continue with adhering, because what happens to those 1,200 students? We are closing the door to those 1,200 students. So what would we do? So we're assuming they will all go, because the average age of these 1,200 students is 24, kind of like where I was. So we give them back to Washoe County School District, or they pay high number in private tuition. So that's what I say to you today, is that we continue to be access to all of our students. That's it.
And the last part here is really just highlighting in blue, pulling out from the proposal document the modifications that we've proposed for TMCC. And so I'm not going to sort of read all this to you. So basically, we were wanting an acknowledgement of the students that we serve that are community members and maybe below a certain level of starting level of academics. And the key thrust here is in that section 1, item B, number 4, the hope that we could still offer for select students and in select programs, offer standalone remedial options for that category of students. And it could be for students who would have the choice, we worded it that they would have the choice to do the co-rec option or the choice to do the smaller steps along the way, or an alternate model that Colorado is doing. You start everyone in the co-rec, and then if a couple weeks in you realize you're destined to fail, have an option, a safety net, something else that they could do, a standalone that they can still continue. That's sort of the worst feeling if you're 2 weeks into a semester course and you already know it's way over your head. And so, those are really the key aspects and that we've brought as considerations to modification of the proposal. Other things that were brought up have been recognized and incorporated in the newest draft. For the next slide. We do offer courses for Disability Resource Center students that take the whole year to go through the Math 120 curriculum. Those would be exempt, those would be exceptions. We would still be offering those opportunities. And then the most recent version has the option for experimentation. And I believe, that's great in recognizing that there could be innovative things happening at different institutions that they might want to experiment with. And, I think that was a great addition. My concern is that when we're going to be doing a wholesale change, having the resources and the energy and the faculty to do much experimentation at the same time will probably be difficult. So I do see that the policy, as currently proposed, would basically take all the energy and the resources for implementing that policy, and would, some of these things that we've been putting into place that we'd like to see what the outcomes might be in another year or two down the road would need to fall by the wayside, at least initially. Perhaps we could bring them back as experiments later, but that would be the concern of that aspect of the policy. And so in your packets, I believe you have the full write-ups, and just like in the slide, what is in blue was what was proposed as modified language per TMCC. And Dr. Hilgerson has the last few words.
So I'm just going to make a few closing comments and then open it up for questions, and then we'll hear from NSHE, and I'm sure you'll have questions for all of us. But the first thing that I want to say is related to a lesson that I used to teach my students. And many of you here know that before entering administration, I was a faculty member for 16 years, full-time at Spokane Community College, and layered on top of that, I taught several years as a part-time faculty member at Gonzaga University and at Lane Community College. And I used to teach my communication students a very important lesson about reasoning, and that relates to causation. And the fallacy that we fall into a lot as Americans, and well, really, I think all people fall into it, is a thing that we call false causality. So, and I think when you hear today, traditional remediation is not working, we agree it is not working, it could work better, but the cause is not the remedial course. The cause is not the intervention. The cause is not faculty attempts over a course of about 15 years now to try to improve success rates in remediation. The cause is more about the individual's life. It could be something as simple as, I'm working 30 hours and my employer just changed my schedule and I can't attend college because if I do, my family won't make ends meet. It could be that simple. It could be that I have math anxiety, and even though I'm fully capable of the work, I don't know it yet. We get a lot of that, a lot of students with math anxiety. So it could be simple family dysfunction or family trauma or family crisis. One of the things we don't know is we don't have a good sense, a good data set on why students stop out, why they drop out, and why they don't succeed at math. One of the assumptions that I'm concerned about is that they don't make it through our SKC or our CTM, they don't make the 80 level because they're too stupid. That is, I believe that's erroneous. I really do. I think the cause is much more complicated because I can tell you, I've been in this now for 34 years, and in the last 15, I have seen numerous faculty members try to solve this puzzle. And it's difficult, it's hard. And I can tell you that we're getting closer. We're getting closer, so we need to continue to puzzle over it. I can also tell you that in the last decade, 2,875 students came to TMCC. They started at SKC or CTM, that 80 level. They have now earned certificates, degrees, and some of them have earned doctorates. I can tell you that. So that's an average, a very ballpark average of about 287 students a year who are not only passing those remedial, very low-level courses, but they are finishing certificates, bachelor's degrees, and graduate degrees. I can tell you that. So at the end, it really comes down to a cost-benefit analysis, doesn't it? Yes, a lot of students fail those low-level classes. but there are enough students who succeed to make it worth the investment. Enough students succeed to make it worth our ability to continue to puzzle over and help those neighbors and friends, right? With that, I'd like to open it up to questions. And a question for anyone on the team who presented.
Yes, and please identify yourself.
Madam Chair. So if I may, Madam Chair, Nate McKinnon for the record. This is very exciting because if you've looked ahead in your presentation materials, you realize that there's two different perspectives on a very similar issue, and we don't often get to hear that. So if it's okay, I'd like to suggest, if it pleases the committee, that I think it would be more appropriate to go on to the next part of the presentation and then do questions for both parties at the end, as opposed to doing one then the other.
I
think that makes good sense.
Okay,
A
thank you.
request.
Yeah.
Thank you. So with this, I will go ahead and turn it over then to the second part of this conversation, and Vice Chancellor of Academic and Student Affairs, Crystal Abba, will be making that presentation. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Crystal Abba, the Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs with the Nevada System of Higher Education.
Use your outdoor voice too.
Outdoor voice.
Yeah.
They're not very loud.
I'm never accused of not using my outdoor voice, but I'll do my best. And I have with me today research scholar Theo Meek. A little bit about myself and about Theo before I get started. I've been in the system office for 17 years, and before that I was with the state legislature. I'm a native Nevadan. I grew up in Elko. I'm very proud of my rural roots, and I feel very passionately. Someone asked me once, why do you do this job? Because it's not fun. And if you asked me that pre-Garrett Abba, Garrett is my 11-year-old, I would have had a really different answer. I feel very passionately that every child in this state deserves the same opportunities that Garrett Abba has. And Garrett Abba is in a private parochial school, so he's in a really different arena than most of the students that come to a community college. But I feel very strongly that those students should have the exact same opportunities that my son has. And it's not just about the economics of that, it's about creating a level playing field. And how many of you, so by the way, been here 17 years. Theo has been here 5 months, but Theo's position was created, and it feels like 5 years. Theo's position was created by the chancellor because the chancellor wanted to provide an opportunity. He wanted to create a resource inside the system office that was dedicated to looking at data, because the problem that we have in the system office right now is we're data rich and information poor. We have tons and tons of data, but you know what we don't do a great job of is really analyzing it. And that's a problem. The reason we don't do that is because I spend most of my day putting out fires and developing policy and having all kinds of conversation and dedicating energy to that, but we don't have enough people to always do that. So the chancellor created this position, and let me tell you, this boy has hit the ground running. So with that, let me step back for a second and just ask kind of a silly question. Is there anybody in the room that doesn't have Netflix? Right? Oh my gosh. Nancy, you don't have Netflix. Well, when I'm done with this, you might want to get it. So if you all do have Netflix, you know the format. When you go on, it shows different shows. Well, Theo recently said to me, Crystal, you have got to watch the TED Talk from Brene Brown. And Brene Brown is a faculty member from a university in the Midwest, and she talks about courage and vulnerability and really putting yourself out there and fighting for what you believe in. And I love the analogy, and my husband watched it recently with me, and he said to me, he's like, okay, I get why Theo asked you to watch this, because you are a gladiator in what you do, especially on this co-rec thing. And I will tell you that having been in the system office for 17 years, I am struggling with this particular conversation today. And the reason I'm struggling with it is because I work for the chancellor, who is appointed by the Board of Regents, which is an elected governing body that has directed me to develop this policy based on state and national data. And never in my 17 years have I been pitted in a situation where I'm having to present the opposite side and defend what I was directed to do to an advisory committee. So that puts me a little bit on the defensive, I'll be totally honest with you. I'm shocked. But today I'm a gladiator. And I'm a gladiator today because I think what is there are very few opportunities in your career when you see data that is as strong as this data. Okay? There is Nevada data, there is Tennessee data, there is Colorado data, and the very worst national data is better than our best success at the community colleges in Nevada. Okay? We aren't doing this well. We can do it better. And what I'm grateful for is the fact that I think that Dr. Hilgersom and her team clearly recognize the benefit of exploring this. But I think the challenge is the Board of Regents has lost their patience. They've lost their patience because we have been having this dialogue since before I came to the system office in 2002. So let me step back and give you a little bit of history just since I've been in this position. So I've been Vice Chancellor since 2012. And in 2012, at that time, because there has never been a year that we weren't talking about remediation, then it was the Remedial Transformation Project. And if you go back, every couple of years, there has been some type of initiative to address this issue of remediation. And so let's talk about that. Let's talk about the honest and uncomfortable reality of the fact that we have students who come from K-12 who are not prepared for the rigors of college-level coursework. And when you hear from Theo, what you're going to hear is that when you look at students that are placed below high school level, and I actually did not realize this until I asked Theo to go back and look at the data, I assumed that those students, and these are the students that TMCC is concerned about, that the vast majority of those students that are placed below high school level, so that means they can't do basic math, okay? They can't add, subtract, multiply, or divide. I thought they were your employees. Okay? I thought they were at least age 24. I thought they were like me, in age 45, age 48. They're not. The vast majority of them, and I believe it was 2/3 of the cohort that we looked at, are recent high school graduates. Wow. Because the reality of it is that if you're in a job, if you're a secretary, you can probably do certain basic mathematics. But what we're seeing in those students that are placed way below high school level, that the vast majority of them are below high school level. Now, let's not make a commentary on K-12, because the reality of it is we have to work with our inputs. And so to that extent, one of the misconceptions of this policy, and I have gotten phone calls and emails of, Crystal, I hear that you're eliminating remediation. We are not, and I repeat, we are not eliminating remediation. We are having a dialogue, and we are contemplating a policy revision that changes when that student gets that support. So, how many of you have ever fried an egg? What does it take? 3 things: an egg, a spatula, and a frying pan, right? So my analogy for co-rec remediation is that the spatula is the essential tool, because I like my egg not over easy, but what is it when it's flipped? Over hard, thank you. Actually, my husband likes it over hard. I can't do it without the spatula. So if you gave me the spatula and then you took the spatula away and then I cooked my egg, I can't do it. The idea of co-requisite remediation is that while the student is in the college level course, they are getting the support that they need. Okay, it's a lot like watching a YouTube video, and I do that all the time in the kitchen. I can't remember how to do something because maybe I did it a long time ago or I've never done it before. So you get that support right there. Now, does that make sense for the student who is well below high school level? That is the elephant in the room, because we think, and we've seen it successful in other states, and you're going to see data today that shows that even the lowest success rate for a student in a co-rec that has an ACT score or 7 or 8 is better than what we are doing in this state right now. That's why we're contemplating this. But more than that, the Board of Regents and Chancellor Tom Riley has adopted aggressive goals for student success. They have set year-by-year numbers for improving the number of students that we graduate. And the reason is because our graduation rates across the system are not stellar. Now, TMCC has had great improvements in their graduation rate, but that graduation rate is based on full-time students. And we know that full-time students, that's the population of student that is the most likely to succeed. So how well does the institution do with those students that are most likely to succeed? We have a whole population of part-time students in particular that don't succeed. And many of those part-time students are exactly as what you heard about today. They struggle with other things. They struggle with basic things like food insecurity, paying their rent. These are the things that we're grappling with. But what we're trying to figure out is the mechanism to make sure that we can improve the number of students that are graduating. Now, you're going to hear a lot of data from Theo, but I want to talk to you about a figure that we talked about in 2012, going back to how long we've had this discussion. In 2012, the correlation was drawn by math faculty in our system from the universities and the community colleges. We looked at the percent of students that graduate if they complete the gateway course, so that entry-level, college-level math course, in the first 2 years. Not the first year, but the first 2 years of enrollment. So the number for WNC, let me just throw this out here. What is the percent of students that graduate if they did not complete the gateway course in the first 2 years of enrollment? And this includes full and part-time students. You want, just throw me out a number. What do you think that is? 10%, 5%, 4%, 17%? Any guess?
2 or 3 maybe.
Guess what it was for WNC? It was 0.3. 0.3. So that means not even one whole person out of 100 graduates. So that means 99.7, if you're going to split that person, don't graduate. Now, I'm going to quote Regent Treytrock, who said, when the board gave me this directive, "It is a travesty to take students' money, place them into remediation, knowing that it is a black hole from which they will not succeed." And you're going to see all kinds of numbers, not just for WNC and TMCC. But what is that number for TMCC when we ran that figure? So for students that don't complete that gateway course, what was their graduation rate at 150% if they didn't complete the gateway course in the first 2 years? It was a little better than WNC. It was 1.5%. Woo! We graduate 1.5 people out of 100. Congratulations. We should be proud. That is a moral travesty, and the Board of Regents has absolutely lost their patience with that. Now, what is that graduation rate for TMCC for those students that do take and successfully complete that gateway course in the first 2 years? 31.9%. 30%. 30 times higher. 30 times higher. Think about that for a second. Now, I haven't even talked to you about co-requisite remediation yet. But again, if you look at the worst data, and they cited some of it here, some of the worst data for co-rec is actually better than what's happening inside of the system right now. But this is more than that. We are asking to change the culture so that we send the message to the community and to students that when you enroll in college, you're going to take a college-level course. There are students right now that come to our institutions and just take a remedial course. So you're coming to college and you're not in college. We are saying if you come to college, you are going to take college-level courses, and we are going to provide you the support that you need to succeed when you need it. Just in time, I'm giving you the spatula so you can flip the egg. That's what we're doing. And again, I think Theo will do a fabulous job at sharing this data with you, but you know what? I don't expect to change any of your minds. I mean, you're here to support the president and to provide her as an advisory entity. But I would like for you to appreciate my perspective on this, which is I have been asked by the Board of Regents to develop this policy in a relatively short period of time. We had 6 weeks to develop this. And traditionally, for policies of this challenge, I'll tell you, 9 months to a year. So I have been sweating bullets in a way. I've lost like 20 pounds for a number of different reasons, but I lost a lot of weight recently because of the sleep that I have lost over this. And part of it was my own struggle knowing the resistance that was going to come from this. But I think what's ironic is the fact that I've got 6 institutions who are strongly behind this, and I've got TMCC who says, I'm behind this, but I want these caveats. Now, the last slides that they presented are asking for revisions to the board policy. They have had those discussions with the chancellor. They have had those discussions with me, and some of those we have incorporated. One of the things that we have incorporated into the policy is the opportunity for an institution to do an experimental program. program, okay? But they have to present it to the board and they have to show the board what this experiment is going to look like. Because a lot of what I keep hearing from the institutions is what we're doing right now is working, but there's a challenge when you remove those students that drop out from the denominator. You automatically make your percentage higher, and then you say, hey, look, we're succeeding, when the reality of it is you've just ignored all those students that dropped out. We are not struggling against an access mission. We believe that students should have access to higher ed. But the reality of it is when they get there and they're not prepared to do what they're supposed to do, and we take their money, that's a problem. And that, again, when I wake up in the middle of the night and can't sleep over this, I keep thinking about Regent Trey Chalk's voice and him saying it is a moral travesty to take their money and know that they won't succeed. So let me go back to 2012. So we had this discussion in 2012. In 2014, the national dialogue on co-requisite remediation began. And we were contacted by Complete College America. They called Nevada and said, hey, we have this project that is designed for Nevada because we think that you are positioned well to really take this co-rec thing full scale. And that was 2014 when I got that phone call. So I hopped on a plane and went to Dallas with a team. And we put together a group of math faculty. This was not driven by administrators, it was driven by math faculty. And we contemplated co-rec in 2014. And the challenge that I had in 2014 was there was no national data on the success of co-rec. I'm 5 years out now, and now I have the national data that shows that success. The problem was in 2014, there were pockets of success here and there, but it was nothing to write home about. It's like doing an analysis based on 1 year's worth of data. How do you know it's like not a blip? That was the problem. So from that, we created the Gateway Course Success Initiative, which basically said, and that's the policy that's in place today. And that policy says that you have to put students, regardless of their credit load, on a pathway to Gateway course completion, okay? So that means if you come in and you're placed below high school level, and I looked at the data to make sure, that's the difference between this policy and historical policies, is that the system office was monitoring what the institutions were doing. Because I'll be honest with you, in the past, the policy was adopted and we kind of left the institutions to their own devices. But there was extreme pressure from the board to make sure that the institutions were following the policy. So they were asked to develop action plans. And one of the strongest action plans that came out of that was held up by the Dana Center from Austin, Texas. They were hired as part of this group. They held up TMCC's action plan, and they said, wow, these folks get it because they drank the Kool-Aid, they've got a strong advising plan, they have a plan here that they held up as an example to the rest of the system. And remember, all the policy said was you've got to put them on the pathway. Now the problem with that policy was, and we're realizing this now, is we had an out in there for those students that were placed below high school level. Because what the policy says, you have to put them on the pathway to complete the course within 1 year. So if you're placed at high school level, you'd go into Math 95 and then you'd go into the Gateway course. 2 semesters you complete in 1 year. What we said, especially for those students that were on a STEM pathway, you got actually 3 semesters, because we knew that there was going to be a challenge there. But the policy had an out. And in hindsight, that out destroyed the integrity of the policy, because what it said was those students who placed below high school level, which is the majority of what you heard about here, policy is not applicable. So what happened then was we then allowed the institutions to create these pathways, and you're going to hear about this from Theo, and note the yellow boxes when you see them, where they could start at a remedial course and it would take them 3 or 4 courses before they got to the Gateway. So obviously 3 or 4 courses, you can't do that in a year. But the real challenge was that the institution that had the strongest Gateway plan never hit their enrollment benchmarks. So there was an integrity issue there. And so that's why I am disturbed by this conversation, because again, what we are trying to do based on the data, we are looking at the data. So let me go back to Brené Brown. And please, if you haven't watched it, unless you're like my husband, I think you would enjoy it, because when she talks about courage and vulnerability, it means laying it all out there and explaining the fact that And that's why, again, back to the gladiator metaphor, she says in that presentation, always go back to the data. I've heard that from the National Governors Association, from the Lumina Foundation, from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, from Complete College America, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. But you want to know the thing about data? You can manipulate data to say whatever the hell you want. I can show you data if I take people out of the denominator that shows success for students that are placed 4 semesters below. That's the challenge with some of this is, do you trust me in what I'm presenting? Do you trust Theo? Do you trust President Hilgerson? You have to figure this out on your own. That's part of the challenge in this. And so that's why I tend to look at, if I'm unsure, I look at those entities, I compare it to what's happening. What is Bill and Melinda Gates saying? They're researchers who are supposed to be independent. What are groups like Complete College America saying, who have dedicated their mission to student success? And so that has been kind of the impetus for all of this, is looking at the data in the most objective way possible, and then using that data to create the rationale for doing this. Because the Board of Regents is not, and you should not be, satisfied with the students that we are losing, because we are losing a lot of students. So with that, I'm going to invite research scholar Theo Meek up here. And remember, 5 months on the job, but just an absolute rock star. I have never been so proud of anyone. And I will tell you, if I think I'm a gladiator, he is like the lion that I'm fighting, because sometimes I have to pull him back. And he's passionate about this. And he is an expert in this from the standpoint that he spent the last, I don't know how many years, 6 years, in the registrar's office at UNR. UNR is one of the institutions that has full-scale co-requisite. And you're going to see some of their numbers here today. And so the nice thing about bringing Theo to the system office, and he helped us with that gateway policy, is that I could tap into all of his expertise in terms of how do we implement this. And I think one of the things that you've heard is the challenges that we will have related to implementing co-rec. So I want to say first and foremost, I have never gone to the Board of Regents and not figured out in advance how I'm going to implement this, but I was told to do this in 6 weeks. Implementing this is not going to be easy. But I believe in the data. And I think this is the right thing to do, despite the fast timeline. And so what you're going to hear, and once Theo gets through the data, I'm going to talk to you directly about the policy. Because one, there is nothing to preclude institutions from creating experimental programs. The out that TMCC has requested basically says if students placed below high school level, it was one of the bullets on their slides, give them the option of not doing co-rec and going on a different pathway. Well, no, we don't want to give them that option, because if we know that the other path is better, we're not going to do that, because creating that out is the same thing as creating the out that we had in the gateway policy, where we cut students off that were below high school level, and we ended up with some dismal numbers. It's hard to go down this type of dramatic change. And I am gratified by the fact that you all are willing to hear this dialogue, because of everyone, I think, as a representative of the community, you should be unhappy with where we're at right now. It's not, we are not. For those, first of all, you can have a long dialogue about the travesty of the fact that we get kids who graduate from high school and they're immediately placed below high school level. It's just wrong on so many levels. But this is something that we have not done historically well. Are there pockets of success? Absolutely. Is there anything to preclude an institution for continuing down that path? Absolutely not, and the policy says that. But you've got to create a rationale, and you've got to present a plan to the board that the board agrees with. Because we live in a state with an elected governing board, and that's who has the authority to make these decisions. And again, that is who I have been asked to present this policy to. And I think it's going to be very challenging. And I think in the next 2 years, so by the way, the implementation date on this is fall 21. So that means institutions basically have 2 years to figure this out. My office will be dedicating resources. We're going to bring in folks from Colorado. We're going to talk about curriculum. We're going to talk about pedagogy. We are going to figure this out. And when I present this policy to the board in June, when they consider it, I am going to say to them, I'm not sure this policy is perfect. Chances are I am going to be back before fall of 21 working out some kinks as I figure out how do we implement this, because I can't do that in 6 weeks. And I also can't put a price tag to it in 6 weeks when I don't know exactly what these pathways are going to look like. I don't know what the curriculum is going to look like, and I don't know where I'm going to find all the faculty that I need. So one of the things I expect to be asked by the board is, hey, Crystal, how much is this going to cost? And I can't give you that after 6 weeks because I don't know what implementation is going to look like. So those are some of the challenges that we have faced. So I think you've heard enough from me, Gladiator A. I will now turn it over to Gladiator B. And Theo is going to present to you some data, and then he'll turn it back to me. And I'm going to highlight a couple of pieces in the policy for you to be aware of, and then we are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Good morning. I am going to talk about the policy paper that was presented to the board in the February-March meeting to the Nevada System of Higher Education Board of Regents. This was, as you've heard, I've had a brief tenure at the NSHE office so far.
For the record, Theo, would you state your name?
Oh,
please?
yes,
Yeah,
Theo Meek. I'm the research scholar for the Nevada System.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about the data. Really, this is broken down into a few different areas. We look at the national data, we look at the student level data within our system, we look at best practices, and then we make recommendations. Let me first make sure that everyone understands the language. I see academics in the room. I know many of us will understand the language. A gateway course is defined as the first college level course that fulfills a degree requirement that a student will enroll into. That may be English 101, Math 120, Math 124 if we're talking about the Southern institutions, or Math 126. The Gateway cohort is first-time, part-time, and full-time degree-seeking students who have no previous enrollment across the system prior to the start term at their institution. So TMCC has a gateway cohort, WNC has a gateway cohort, and then of course we have the system-wide gateway cohort, which is just the compilation of all of the individual institution gateway cohorts. Remedial education, you'll see referenced obviously through the title, remedial education. Traditional remediation is not working. Remedial education is any course numbered below 100 that's offered within the system, with the exception of the co-rec course that's currently offered 96A and 96D. You'll also see less than high school math discussed. That's any course that's that's below Math 95. Math 95 is elementary algebra, so courses like the Skill Center, the CTM courses that you've heard, Math 92, Math 91, Algebra Refresher, things like that. Co-requisite remediation, I do want to make a point of clarification from the presentation that you just heard. The presentation that we just heard said that the idea of co-requisite remediation is to put two classes together, and that's not the entire case. The point of co-requisite remediation is not to mash Math 96 and 126 into a 15-week block and expect the student to be successful. This is a curriculum design and rethinking of the delivery of curriculum. It is not mashing two courses together. It is aligning the remedial content that you need to be successful in the college level course and delivering it at the time that the student is receiving the college level information. So the idea of remediation, we know nationally, and I'm thrilled to hear the agreeance from TMCC, from our other colleagues, as we've hosted open forums, that there is a general agreement that traditional remediation is not working. And we've heard that time and time again, and just about, we had 3 co-requisite forums in which we discussed the policy, heard opportunities, heard concerns from faculty, and I don't think anyone stood up and said, I'm proud of where we are right now, and I think that what we need to stick with what we're doing. We didn't hear that across the board. We heard we know traditional remediation is not working, and we have ideas on how to fix it. Nationally and at the state level, we look identical to the national dialogue. 67%, 2/3 of students at the community colleges are placed into remediation. Our number is a little bit lower at the state and universities. Then there's the enrollment issue. So we have placement and then we have enrollment. It's one thing to be placed into remediation. It's another whole different beast to actually get enrolled into remediation. And some of the information that you heard from Crystal about students not enrolling and not taking that gateway course within the first 2 years, there's issues of enrollment, not necessarily issues of placement, although we'll talk a little bit more about that. 56% of black students are enrolled in remediation. A higher percent, of course, are placed into remediation. This hits home what you just heard from Dr. Gutierrez, that this is an equity issue. Traditional remediation is failing our ethnic minority students, our historically underrepresented students. Traditional remediation has dismal success rates, very low graduation rates. We are failing those students that need our support the most. Degree completion rates are low. Across the system, 8% of students that are enrolled into remediation will graduate. So here's the first issue, placement. Placing too many of our students into remediation. You see here the 2-year total, 2/3 of students are placed into remediation. The 4 years looks a little bit different. TMCC placing just right up at the 2-year total for the state, 2/3 of students into remediation. Now, when we look at enrollment, the story is quite different. Everyone that you see in red is currently in violation of the Gateway Course Success Policy, which states that students need to be on a pathway to complete their Gateway Math and English courses within the first year. That red figure represents students who are not enrolled in any math course right now. The yellow, 20%, you'll see, are all students who are placed into remediation that is below the high school level. And you'll see TMCC's figure is the highest in the state. And you'll see when we talk about the gateway pathways, that's because of the multitude of different avenues that TMCC has in which they are deeply remediating their students, requiring students to go into Skills Center 80, requiring them to go into CTM 86, Math 92, whatever it is. TMCC offers the most courses below the high school level. So only 30% are placing into that middle area, Math 95 to Math 98. Again, that's the buildings of algebra, elementary algebra and intermediate algebra. And here's perhaps one of the first scariest slides that I'll present. And I want to echo that I also am losing sleep over this, but I have not had the benefit of weight loss off of the stress of this. So when we look at degree completion rates, exactly what Crystal had just shared, we know that when students get into and complete that Gateway College course within the first year or first 2 years, this is looking at within the first year, the students have a much higher success of graduation. 12%, 14% of students that are in less than high school math are graduating. And those are students that actually enroll. Again, we're talking about the issue of enrollment, but we're also talking about the issue of placement. The graduation rate of students who place into remediation is far lower than that 14%. Again, just to echo, we have an overrepresentation of minority students in remediation, and this is not a unique factor to Nevada. Across the nation, we are placing far too many of our ethnic minorities into deep remediation pathways that require them to spend their own money, because if you're placing into CTM or Skill Center, you're not eligible for the federal financial aid. You don't get the luxury of using your Pell Grant money to the courses that are being required for you to take. And excuse me, these students are placing into these courses that have extremely high fail rates in them. And we'll talk a little bit about what TMCC's fail rate looks like for the Skills Center course, the deepest, most remedial course that's offered that has an 80% fail rate in it. So too many of our minority students in our system are enrolling into remediation, and those remediation courses have extremely low success rates. We are putting them on a pathway knowing from our data that they have a 20% chance of even passing the first class, much less making it to the gateway course within the first 2 years, much less not even dropping out. So here's the first piece that hopefully will shed light on the data of co-requisite remediation to show that when you offer co-requisite support, students will rise to the challenge. When you place students into a college level course, when you tell them you are college level material, you just need a little bit more support, they will rise to the occasion, and that is true regardless of their level of academic underpreparedness. Right here, you see slides from Tennessee data, which says that even for students at the lowest levels of academic underpreparedness, students with an ACT of a 13, of a 14, of a 15, those students are at least 11 times more successful in the co-requisite course. Tennessee went from a 3% completion rate of their gateway course, which looks similar to the completion rates for our remediated students in Nevada, to a 33% completion rate of gateway college level within the first year. These are incredible numbers because we know from, again, our national data, from our data as well as national data, that if we can get them into that college level class within the first year, their success rates, their retention rates are so far above and beyond what they are for students on traditional prerequisite pathways. So even for students with the most concern, which we've just heard from the previous presentation, that co-requisite remediation will work, but only for students in Math 95 and Math 96. Unfortunately, we just heard that there is still concern that says that students in that skill center, students in that CTM will not be successful. That is a tragic flaw in the presentation. We are assuming and ignoring national data that says that students are not going to be successful. This says 33% is nothing to write home about and nothing to necessarily retire upon, but it is significantly better than where we're at right now. So one thing that you'll see when Crystal talks about the exception for experimental programs is you've got to show us that you're at least matching the co-rec numbers, because right now we're not even in the ballpark of a 33% pass rate of gateway college level in the first year. So that's for math. When we look at I will also add that they have information on adult learners, and when we look at adult learners, guess what? They also have much higher success rates in the college level course, because what adult student wants to be told, you can earn your bachelor's degree or you can earn your associate's degree, but it's going to take you 5 math classes over 5 semesters at most, maybe 4, maybe 3 if they really expedite. 3-4 classes to complete the college level gateway math course, when instead with co-requisite remediation you say, yep, it's going to be 1 5-credit math course, but guess what, you're done, and after you finish that in the first semester, and we're going to support you through the process. You're going to get the remediation components that you need at the time that you need it the most, as opposed to relying on traditional pathways where the student is getting the foundation 1 to 3 semesters before they're actually going to use it in practice in their college level Math 120, Math 126 course. You deliver the support that they need at the time that they're using it. You give them the spatula at the time that they have cracked the egg onto the frying pan. When we did an audit of the current pathways for math placement within the system, we saw that they are very long and very complex. All of the yellow that you see represented at the deepest level, Skill Center 80, Skill Center 85, CTM 86, and Math 92, those are exclusive to TMCC. TMCC is the only institution offering those courses. CSN and the other institutions, WNC, you'll see 93 and 91 offered, but all 4 of those are TMCC exclusive courses. They are extremely long, so you see a student might go into Skills 80 if they pass the required math placement exam, which is the AccuPlacer. So that's another critical component, is the AccuPlacer is the gatekeeper for a student's success in those courses. The course as it's designed right now, the student cannot successfully complete Skill Center 80 and move on to the next course unless they pass a standardized placement exam. We forbid that in the policy because if we believe that if the student has completed the course and gained the content and the expertise that they need to be successful, they should be able to move on and not be required to complete another standardized placement exam. So there are 3 different models of co-requisite remediation. The accelerated learning program, which is the only one that's currently being used at the system at any sort of scalable timeline, is what you see here, the Math 126E and the Math 120E. So this is you teach the gateway course with a paired remedial component. So Math 96A goes with Math 120E at UNR, and at Nevada State College, Math 96D goes with Math 126E, and so on. So you have a 3-credit college-level gateway course that you pair with a 2-credit or a 1-credit remedial component. So as opposed to the traditional pathway before UNR and Nevada State College implemented these, the student would have to take 2 semesters and 6 credits in order to complete the Math 126 course. They would take Math 96 in the first semester for 3 credits if they place into Math 96, and Math 126 in the second semester with another 3 credits. This both shortens the timeline by having that student complete the gateway course in the first semester, but it also requires the student to pay less in registration, tuition, and fees. They're saving for Math 126, they're saving an entire credit on registration fees, and for Math 120, they're saving 2 credits of registration fees. The structured assistance and the 101 plus model are also options. If there is any concern or questions about what those models look like, I'd be happy to discuss them and institutions and states that are using them, but right now they're not widely used across our system. So I want to just hit this point home that traditional remediation is not working. And that's especially true for our students who are historically underrepresented, our Black students, our Hispanic students, our American Indian and Alaska Native students, that have extremely low success rates. If we start with 100 students that place into remedial math within NSHE's community colleges, only 59 will enroll into the required course. So again, we're dealing with 2 issues here. We're dealing with an enrollment issue and we're dealing with a placement issue. We're placing too many students into remedial courses with very low success rates, and they are not even enrolling into those courses. Because the other point is that if we can even get them in a remedial course, they have higher success rates of completing the gateway course in the first year or 2 years. Not very much higher, but we go from 0.3% to maybe a 1.3%. So 59 will enroll into the required course. 30 will enroll into the gateway course within their first year, and this is across all, this is students that are enrolled in Math 95, Math 96, Skill Center 80, Skill Center, CTM. 30 will enroll into the gateway course within the first year. 24 will actually complete the gateway course. That's passing with a D- or better. And historic NSHE data says that only 8% will go on to graduate within 3 years. That leaves 92 students either still in the system, accumulating excess credits that they're going to be penalized for at the tail end of their time at your institution. They've completely dropped out of the institution because they've been told you're not college material. You have to take 3 or 4 courses before you can become college material, or they've transferred outside of our state. I'll skip that to talk a little bit more about really rounding this out. We know this now. Traditional remediation is not working. It's not working for our white students, it's not working for our non-white students, and it is especially detrimental to our non-white students. Traditional remediation is, reforming remediation is the most important turning point for closing the achievement gap, and that's just a numbers statement because of the sheer numbers of ethnic minorities that are going into these courses with, again, very, very, very low success rates. Co-requisite remediation results in much higher student success outcomes. Think about that slide that showed that students were 11 times more successful with an ACT of a 13. That's just about as low as you can go on the ACT. Of a student with an ACT of a 13, they were 11 times more successful in completing the gateway course, within the first year than they are on a traditional pathway. That data, that traditional prerequisite data, that 3%, that looks identical to our Nevada data. Regardless of academic prep, I just want to hit this point home a little bit more. Regardless of the level of academic underpreparedness, if a student places into CTM, if they place into Skill Center 80, Skill Center 86, Math 92, Math 91, Math 93, Math 95, Math 96, they will be more successful in the co-rec model because you're changing the narrative. You are saying, instead of us, I'm going to steal the thunder a little bit from one of Crystal's slides, we are saying that instead of you being required to be ready for us, we have to be ready for you. And that is what the idea of co-requisite remediation is. It says that you are college material, you're going to enroll into the college level course, you just need additional support, and we are here to provide you with that support. The support programs that were just mentioned in the previous presentation should continue to exist. Nothing says that the co-requisite remediation means that you pull all academic support for students. In fact, it says the opposite. It says that you just need to deliver the academic support just in time, right when the student needs it the most. So before I pass it off to Crystal, I want to hit back on a few points that I heard. The fail rate of the co-rec course, which you just saw in the previous presentation, about 34% of students failing the co-rec. Well, first off, the current Skill Center 80 course for both fall 2016 and fall 2017 has nearly an 80% fail rate, so I will take a 30% fail rate over an 80% fail rate any day of the week. But the 34%, the tragic flaw in that figure is that we are assuming that it's the co-requisite course that's breaking the student, and that's not true. Of those 34% of students that are failing the co-rec course, they're not solely failing the co-rec course. They're failing out of college. It's not an issue of co-requisite remediation and co-requisite support and the class being too hard. It's them not being ready for college. It's all of those other non-academic factors: mental health, food insecurity, homelessness, childcare, transportation. Those are the factors that are influencing that 34% fail rate, much far and above just the co-requisite course being the course that's breaking the students. That's just not true. The parachute courses that were identified as a possible avenue, yes, when Colorado first implemented this work, we've been told time and time and again, as we have these conference calls with Tennessee and with Colorado, is that they've had these exact same conversations. They've had the exact same fears, the exact same concerns. It's an absolutely terrifying thing to do. I understand that. When Colorado implemented it, their parachute courses were that out, you could say, to help those students that are going to get here and just aren't going to be successful. Well, it turns out that after, I think, one semester, they ran the parachute courses for one semester, continue to offer them in subsequent semesters, but they canceled them for low enrollment. Because when you tell a student you can complete your college level math in the first semester, you're just going to need to put in the time and effort into it, the student is far more willing to put in the time and effort into that than they are to take a 3 or 4 semester sequence to complete the college level course in the first semester. And the last thing that I want to mention is there was a sentence on the presentation previous that gives me heart palpitations. And it says, TMCC will abandon successful math skill center and CTM courses. The idea that 20% of students passing the course is successful and calling that a successful program deeply concerns me. We can do better as a state. We can do better as an institution. There are exceptional people across the state. This is a terrifying thing to do, but we cannot settle with a 20% pass rate and a 53% retention rate and call that a win. Those are not successful programs. We can do better. The idea of co-requisite is to, again, tell the student, you are college level material, you are a college student, we're going to just provide you the academic support that you need. So I'll pass it off to Crystal, and then we'll open it to questions.
Did I mention he's only been on the job for 5 months?
Great job, thank you, Thea.
He brings out the inner mother in me, because with Mother's Day on Sunday, if there's one thing I wish for Garrett Abbott, it's that he find passion in his life the way Theo has found passion for this topic, because I can't beat that. So very quickly, I just want to talk about the policy and point out a couple of things. I know that you have this draft. There are just a few quick things I want to point out. Again, we are not eliminating remediation. We are requiring that if you're not in high school and you're enrolled at our institution, that you get remedial support, co-requisite support, at the same time you take the college level course. There is a provision on the second page of the policy proposal in subsection 2D, and I'll just read it to you. Credit and non-credit skills development curriculum may be provided as supplemental instruction for those students enrolled in a co-rec gateway course. That means TMCC and any institution in the system wants to provide credit or non-credit support outside of the CROEC, so they want to keep doing Skills Center or any other type of service like that. They can continue to do that. It is permissible in the policy. Going on to the next page, there is also an exception in there for disabled students. That's a population that we haven't discussed. We don't expect disabled students to be on this pathway, so there is a clear exception for those students with documented disabilities. Third point, experimental programs. There is nothing to preclude TMCC from developing something, and I'm throwing down the gauntlet, just like I said in the forums. You come up with something where you beat these success numbers, go for it. But you got to show me how you're going to get there. You got to show the board how you're going to measure success, and then you can go and do it. So there is nothing to preclude the institution from taking a different approach, but they've got to ask permission to do it, because in the past, when we've let them go, they end up going down a road that we don't want them to go down. And that's really it for the policy. So continuing through here, I'm going to skip this. Again, this is about changing the culture, and we've already talked about this. So again, I want to thank everyone, and I want to thank Dr. Hilgersum for including us, and I will sit down and be happy to answer any questions.
So before we get into the question and answer, I just would thank you very much, everyone, for the presentations today. We feel it's important for the council to understand these issues, the full scope of all the consideration behind these types of issues. And so before anyone directs a question, please identify who you're going to be directing your question to. But I want to just revisit the purpose of this Institutional Advisory Council, just as a reminder. So we are charged with providing counsel and feedback to not only the college president, but also to the Vice Chancellor for community colleges and the Chancellor on issues that are brought before the council related to growth and sustainability of industries in our communities, and methods by which the college may maximize the potential to effectively and efficiently deliver curriculum that most appropriately meets the needs of the diverse population served. So we are not here to advocate for one position over another. We're here to educate ourselves on the various sides of this issue that is now under consideration. So with that, you're welcome to open the dialogue and ask any questions you may wish to ask.
BJ North. Whoops. For the record. I'd like to ask, what is the definition of success? You've talked about definition of success throughout the presentation on both sides of the presentation, but could you define what does that look like for you? What are you, when you're talking about this, what is actually your definition of success for a student that is in the community college arena?
Thank you, Crystal Abba. So first of all, I want to point out that this policy is for degree-seeking students. So for a degree-seeking student, we think success is getting a degree. If it's a certificate-seeking student, it's getting a certificate. So we want them to achieve what their ultimate goal is. And we know, based on the initial correlation between the completion of the Gateway course, that there's a strong correlation between completion of the Gateway course in the first year and achieving your ultimate goal. That was the difference between the 1% and the 30% and the 1.5% and the 33%. So that's the definition. Now, if you drill down on that and you look at individual course success, there's multiple ways to define that. But we want you to complete that course and achieve the grade so that you can then apply it to the degree requirement. So in some cases that's a D-, and in some cases it's a C or above. So it depends on the program to that extent. But in general, from a policy standpoint, from the standpoint of the governing board's perspective, we are ultimately defining student success as achieving your goal of a degree if you are a degree-seeking student. So if you're not a degree-seeking student, this policy does not apply to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Holly, you look like you have a question.
Yes, thank you. I actually have two questions very quickly, more related to Collie Hutter, Clickbon. The students that we traditionally see and again on the IAC, if you look at the original charter, much of it was focused on workforce development. Now, we all understand that TMCC is a college, a degree awarding institution, which we strongly support, but there is a very large element of the workforce development and what we're looking at in connection to the community. And just a little clarification on two things. One, it was indicated that some students, there was some resistance to having to take 6 credits in that first, to get that math, which I want everyone to learn math. But again, if someone who is putting many of our employees back through college, that is a heavy lift if they're just starting and they're actually working full time to do that. And I was just wondering how we might, as someone who is putting students through, because we are, in today's world, we are having to re-educate our employees on about a 2-year cycle. We have to pretty much retrain them in the manufacturing environment we're in. So that's one thing I would like to, eventually just see some clarification, because we want them to succeed, but we may not be able to get them in a 3-credit course. So I'm just, from a strictly practical standpoint, that was my one question. I'm trying to remember on the other one. Again, you're saying degree seeking, and so this does not actually impact those students that will be the MT1 or the MSSC certification programs. Is that correct? Or because eventually, if you do an apprentice program, then they're going to end up with a degree.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to address the first half of your question.
This is clarification
Absolutely.
for those of us, so we understand what we're doing.
Theo Meek, research scholar. So to first tackle the question on the credit load, absolutely we could understand that a student would have previously enrolled. Let me first start by saying this is under the assumption that a student your student or your employee is at a less than high school remedial, has a need for remediation that is less than the high school. I think that we would assume that hopefully that student might at least be at the high school level, but let's go with the assumption that they're at the less than high school level. So whereas the current pathway says you can enroll into a 1.5 credit course, it only meets 2 hours a week. And now you're being required to enroll into a 5 credit course. Well, the important piece that's missing in the discussion about the skills of the success of the Skill Center course is, Dr. Julie Ellsworth talked about this, but the success rates of the Skill Center course are high for students the very few number of students who are pouring out 12 hours a week into that course. So in order to be successful in the Skill Center course with a high success rate, with any sort of success rate that would, give the student a greater than 50% probability of passing the course, you have to devote at least 12 hours a week to be successful in that class. The co-requisite course is 6 hours of instruction a week. So already there, we're talking about a lower time commitment because the current model says if you're going to be successful in the skills center, you need, the 2 hours in class, and then you need to devote 10 to 12 hours a week online to be successful or to have a decent success rate. The skill center the co-requisite course is a higher seat time, but it's the same idea that if a student spends more time in the course, they're going to be more successful. The current Skills Center just expects the student, hopes that the student will opt into that time when it's not through a required seat time. The co-rec, instead of assuming that the student will make time, it makes time for the student to be successful in that course as opposed to relying on them to fit it into their busy schedules. The expectation of success is known to the student upon enrollment as opposed to enrolling into a 1.5 credit course and assuming that if you just spend the 2 hours a week, you're going to be successful in the course.
Did you have did your second part of the question get answered as well?
It's just a clarification.
For the certificate. Yeah. So for those courses or for those programs, if they have an embedded curriculum, so welding is always the example that we use. So welding does not have a specific math requirement. The student might get the welding, the math foundations that we deem appropriate, that the institution has deemed appropriate through 1, 2, or maybe 3 welding classes. That's completely fine. In no way does this policy require students whose programs don't require math or English to enroll into a math or English course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mike.
Mike Holmes for TMCC. A little bit of clarification because I think everything that we've been hearing and seeing has been academic transfer levels, Math 120, 126. We just went to the bottom, which is a certificate level. And in the intermediate strata is the Math 108 cohort that is for the terminal Associate of Applied Science degrees. And a lot of that requirement for math is what we have here at Edison campus. So the completion for that course is not as rigorous as the Math 120 and the 126, which has the higher algebras and calculus and some of those kinds of considerations, but it's math for technicians, and that's a very applicable math level for one of the skills that the people coming through these programs down here are cut out for, along with embedded math because it's completely reinforced in some of the technical classes that we have. So that's a little bit of a hybrid explanation that's kind of been in between the sheets with what we've seen up here, but that's what I see and experience myself. So.
And would math for technicians be impacted by the new policy that's being proposed?
It would be because it's considered a gateway course. It's above the 100 level, and the students have to test into that. However, as an alternative, we do have some embedded math in some of the classes, which is the Math 108 level. And I think they've got to complete three classes to get credit for that embedded credit. So if they only complete 2, they don't comply with the math cohort requirement, gateway.
So I have 2 questions, and I'm not sure exactly who best to answer each of them, but especially in light of the conversations earlier about WING grant funding and education funding, I'm confused by the funding implications to both the community college and the students that would be a potential outcome of this policy. And then the second question is that we have worked, as EDON, fairly closely with the entities that are doing high school equivalency and remedial math and other things in the community to try to get those who are either unemployed or underemployed without a high school diploma trained in order to have the basic fundamentals that they need to even be considered for employment. And so I'm just curious if the remedial math, and I understand that there's a remedial component to the progression that you've talked about today, if that remedial math is no longer happening here, it eliminates one of the 3 or 4 places that people can get it today, and there is already not enough output from those places or capacity from those places, many of whom are funded by WIOA funds through Nevada Works. So what happens to those people that just cannot cut it, I guess? In a college setting, there's not the capacity on these 3 entities that are left, where do they go, or what are their options, I guess, to get going, to even get into a pathway to a career? So
I can do the funding one.
Okay.
I can do the, Karen Hilgerson, for the record, I'll answer the funding question as best I can. Part of the concern is that if we offer basically the CTM SKC 80 series on kind of a volunteer non-credit option, number one, we don't get any funding for those. So we are basically going to have to pool resources from somewhere else at the college in order to do that. It's basically giving, and I don't know how we can do that. And number two, right now, in order to qualify for state and federal aid, you are degree seeking or certificate seeking. And so as it stands now, the student's aid pays for a credit course in SKC or CTM. They do not pay if it's, please go to the tutoring center and get some help. They don't cover that. So for the student, not being able to offer a credit section means that they will very likely struggle with well, we can't afford to do it if it doesn't have credit, and they can't afford to get it from somewhere else. So it creates a funding dilemma. I also need to say that in our SKC series, over the last 10 years, our success rate is 50%. We did have a very bad success rate this fall because we tried to do some new things and they didn't work very well. That's the bottom line. But over a 10-year period of time, the success rate is 50%. In our CTM face-to-face, which began in, I believe, 2012, the success rate is 74%. 74%. Now, that is a very intense face-to-face model. It's great when students do that model. We've had summer sessions of that. The success rate is 90% or higher. So, so I do have to mention that because there are really quite a number of people succeeding in those courses, but we also believe we can do better. And we also believe that a segment of those students should be in a co-requisite.
Thanks.
Right? So.
And then.
Yeah.
If I could just clarify, Nate McKinnon for the record. Madam President, while Math 95 and 96 are financial aid eligible and generate weighted student credit hours for the formula as currently offered, I want to be clear that Skills Center and any courses below Math 95 and 96 are not financial aid eligible.
But we do get state funding for them. Yes, we do.
Yes, you do get state funding, and there's nothing in the policy to preclude that from continuing to be credit bearing. So if you look at that provision in subsection 2D, it says credit and non-credit supplemental instruction. So you can continue to have it delivered on a credit basis so that you may receive state funding for that. It's just considered supplemental instruction to the co-rec. But Nate's Vice Chancellor McKinnon's comment on the federal aid, he is absolutely correct. There is a federal regulation that provides that you cannot receive federal aid for courses that are below high school level. And obviously, that's a clear policy message from the federal government saying, you know, we're supporting these low-income students, but if they're below high school level, it cannot be used for courses that are below high school level.
So Vice Chancellor Abba, I really don't understand what you just said, and it's so important. I get the federal financial aid piece, and currently if a student gets 2 credits of SKC, we get the $156 per credit if they complete, okay? I don't understand when you said you can still offer that as supplemental instruction and for credit. I don't understand. I think the policy says that we would not be permitted to offer a remedial standalone.
For the record, Crystal Abba, so let me read subsection 2D. Credit and non-credit skills development curriculum may be provided as supplemental instruction for those students enrolled in the co-rec gateway course only. In other words, you may offer that as supplemental instruction. Now, you're right.
If a college level course.
If you're taking the co-rec course, and the co-rec course happens to be 5 or 6 credits depending on the level that you're at, and the student chooses to go into your supplemental credit course, they could end up in, 6 credit co-rec plus how many ever credits for your CTM or skills course. but it does not preclude the institution from offering that. And of
So-
course, you will get state funding for it if you've attached credits
So we're
to
putting
it.
an arithmetic student with algebra. Now, let me ask a question. Could, based on the policy, as it stands today, would we be permitted to offer a skills center or a CTM 80 with a math 95 as a co-requisite?
No, ma'am.
So we're basically taking arithmetic, and you saw the problems. You saw what 120 is today. That's what NCHE is recommending. Okay, I got it.
Thanks for the clarification. So, John, did you have a comment on
I just have
high school equivalency question?
Just a real quick clarification question for me. The policy
Identify
doesn't
yourself,
do
please.
anything to change the admission level.
Correct.
Thank you.
That was John Thurman, Nevada Works. Yes.
Well, for record, I'm Sesh Komuri. I think it's a really good discussion from both sides. On one side, I really appreciate the programs that they put together, and I had the benefit or the luxury of actually touring the Industry 4.0 lab a month ago, and I've seen some of the cool stuff they're doing. And I can understand from your side, from the funding standpoint, you want to put your limited resources where you get the most bang for the buck. So I can see where you guys are coming from. Having said that, my biggest issue is I really don't need to read a report to know that traditional remediation will fail. Because for the last 20, 30 years, across the country, at every level we've been struggling, whether it's at high school level, at a junior college level, postgrad level, everywhere we've been struggling. And we've been trying different things. Some things work, some things haven't worked as well as we thought. Okay? So traditional remediation doesn't work. That doesn't mean we don't stop trying, number one. Number two, even remediation, we are not living in a static society. Things are changing. Technology is evolving. The students' expectations are changing. The way they learn is changing. So we have to constantly keep improving to make sure that whatever we are trying to do is effective. So from that standpoint, my biggest takeaway from what you guys presented is tying success rates to graduation rates. I have a big problem with that. Okay? What we are looking at is we are saying, okay, we are spending X dollars per student, and how many students did we graduate? What we are not looking at is what is the benefit that these X students have brought to the society. I'll give you a very good example. I work with amputees all the time. We spend several thousands of dollars in their surgical care and post-surgical care. We spend $5,000 per amputee on their rehabilitation. And we are trying to cut even that thing down because we're saying, well, there is no big difference whether they're staying for 1 day or 2 days, so why should we pay for 2 days of rehab? We'll pay only for 1 day rehab. What we are not measuring is whatever we are doing in post-surgical rehabilitation process is not working because over the lifetime, we are spending anywhere from $250,000 to $1 million on each individual trying to fix what we should have fixed on day one. So the problem is not that our technique that we are using for rehab is not working. The problem is we are not doing enough of it. Okay? And to take away even what little is working because we are measuring the wrong thing doesn't really help. And even if one person is active over their career, that is several $1 million that we are not spending in fixing things that shouldn't have broken in the first place. And if this person is actually working and contributing to society, it brings a lot more returns too. So I think looking at just the graduation rate is by itself, it's one of the measures, but to use that as the only measure or the most important measure, that I have a little bit of a problem. The other thing is, places like TMCC are open access. That means whoever comes in, we got to take them. And since we are not putting any requirement on who we take in, we put more people in remedial courses than other people do. That is a given. So why is that a problem? I would say that is a good thing. And I would even argue that if we are getting more students who are not ready, who need remedial support, that is a good thing because we are actually going out in the community and we are encouraging people to get up there and get certification, degrees, whatever it is, to be more successful members of society. We are being successful in doing that stuff, so we are getting more people coming. Yes, they are not ready, that's a different story, but at least we are doing good thing in trying to get them motivated enough to come and join the workforce and do what it takes to do. So using that as a metric and say, this is not working is a big problem. And for me, the last problem I see is comparing across the country, we are not comparing apples and apples. Yes, some state might have 37% or 40% or 60%, right? But Nevada is not the same. We are at the bottom of the pile in every measure that you take. So by saying, well, they had 17% and we are getting only 3%, that's not fair. You know, there has to be a more realistic way to compare. And by your own admission, you said that we looked at all this data and the data is failing. True, but I would like to know before we throw something out, what are the stuff that actually works? We need to look at the data, make our analysis, say these programs actually work, these programs actually benefited us, these things are not working, and cut the ones that are not working rather than say, well, we need to rethink the whole strategy and come with a new remediation program. That's, you know, we can be doing this thing every 2 years. It's not going to make any difference. I'm sorry, I get very passionate about it.
Yeah, thank you for your input. Does anyone else have a question? Julie?
Julie Muley, for the record. I just want to first commend everyone who argued for their point of view because the one thing you share is a passion for student success. And I think that's why we're all here. And just a couple of comments. I've been at TMCC for 24 years. I've seen a lot of pendulum swings. We were an open access bridge to the university. Then we were more of a closed access. Then we were kind of okay, now we're measured by graduation rates, as Sesh mentioned. And my concern is whenever we have a pendulum swing, we lose people. And there are a lot of people, I'm one of those people. I tested into Math 093 as a 52-year-old adult. And I went through this skill center. I thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a try. And because I'm competitive, I finished my wheel in 4 weeks. I was pretty darn proud of that. And I now have my master's degree. Obviously, I went on from that. But I was math phobic, and I think there are a few folks in my age bracket that may be a little afraid of college. I understand college is a business. We have to show success. I fear for the folks who might be lost in the process, and whenever there's a pendulum swing, I see people kind of lost. So my question, is there any, this isn't done in a silo, obviously, is there any wraparound, any thought to wraparound services to make sure that students are being guided in the right way, because this is a big change, and to make sure that students know where they're supposed to go? Is there thought about extra advising, more guidance for students so we don't lose them if this process is implemented?
Yeah, absolutely. Theo Meek, for the record. Yes, your point about wraparound services is absolutely heard, and we know that those are going to be the linchpins to success of an implementation for policy like this. The board, along with this policy, will also be considering a policy to mandate academic advising across the system, because that's something that is inconsistent across the system, and understanding that advising is one of the biggest linchpins to student success. If they know what courses they need to go on to, and if they are given the opportunity to make an informed decision about their major of choice, they are far more successful. So yes, absolutely. There is nothing in the policy to, of course, preclude wraparound services. The programs that are working, the tutoring center integrations, the use of first-year experience courses in supporting courses like this and in supporting students that need this kind of work should absolutely continue and will continue to be required for these students to be successful.
So if you could just for one moment, I believe that Councilmember Thurman needs to leave and wanted to make a comment, or I'm not sure I got an answer to my question about the other people that are out there that will be able to fill the gap between the two different programs. But John, did you have a closing remark or question?
I apologize. I do have to run, but just maybe an observation or comment before I do. John Thurman, for the record again. But what I'm truly hearing is that a blend of both of these is probably the ideal world, is what I'm hearing from both presentations. But to that, I think the assessment of the individual coming into the institution and then the hands-on mentoring, counseling, directing is probably key to this whole thing. I don't disagree with any of the statistics and numbers that I've heard, and that's what leads me to that blended model. So with that, I will take leave. Sorry, I have to leave early.
Great. Thank you, Councilor.
For the record, Crystal Abba, so with respect to Mr. Thurman's comments, I could not agree more. And with respect to Julie's comments about the pendulum swinging, you know what? I philosophically agree with that because just over the course of my career, I've seen the pendulum on so many things swing. And you're right, we do lose people. I think one of the challenges that we have, or actually one of the successes that we've seen, is with the Gateway Course Success Policy, which was just making sure, are we putting those students on that pathway? It used to be the case that 60% of students at CSN didn't take math in 2 years. And of course, you saw the correlation. They lost most of those. Now they're down to 40%. But what you can't get from looking at those percentages is their cohort is like 5,000 compared to other institutions like TMCC size, where their cohort was 12 to 1,500. So they were dealing with a much bigger population. So going from 60 to 40% not enrolling is a much bigger accomplishment. So you're right, there are always going to be cases. It's really hard to find a silver bullet, and I don't think that we would ever represent this as a silver bullet. What the desire of the board is to figure out things to do better and to really kind of push the institutions. And I think we all, I'm seeing some heads nod. We're all agreeing we want to do better. And you're right, it may be a blend somewhere in the middle. And like I said, I'm probably going to end up going back to the board before the fall 21 implementation date and tweaking this. But I think we have to get through that phase 2 of really figuring out implementation, and I can't do that in 6 weeks. So I don't know what this is actually going to look like 2 years from now, but I do know that this is an incredibly productive dialogue because we can't possibly be satisfied with where we're at now. So Julie, my hat's off to you for a lot of things, but I completely agree.
So we're going to have to cut this agenda item and go ahead and close out the discussion. So we've received a lot of great information today. If you have questions, you're welcome to reach out to Dr. Hilgerson, to the NISHI staff, to any of the regents, or to the research expert over there. So we appreciate having this dialogue. And because we're 15 minutes from the end of this meeting, I'm going to go ahead and move into quickly some other agenda items to close out the meeting today. I apologize that we're not able to take a break, but in order to get everyone out on time, I would like to go ahead and move on. And there will be a section also for new business from the council members as well. So with that, shall we go to a quick update, Dr. Hilgerson, on your capital projects?
And if it's okay, Madam Chair, I can do my update and I can do the other presentation in probably 5 minutes.
Perfect.
Can I lump them together just for
Absolutely.
speed?
Thank you. So that's agenda
So
item
quick update on
number
capital.
6 and agenda item number 8. That will be combined into one item.
Yes, and so first of all, I want to say our soccer field looks amazing. It's on schedule. Oh my goodness, next time you're at the Dandini campus, the lights are up. It looks wonderful. It has magnificent views. The fitness center is, at one point, they were talking about a little bit of a delay, maybe like 2 months due to the weather, but I was told this week that they've actually made up some time due to the nice weather. So we're hoping for an opening of that no later than January of next year, but it could be sooner. It could end up being in early fall term for the fitness center. The EATS project is, the architects have been instructed to not rush and to take their time. So on May 16th, we are hosting a charrette and inviting a lot of industry folks. We're calling it Wine and Wisdom. And we're asking industry to come and help us with the culinary piece of that project. So the architects, in short, are still gathering information, and we're hoping that in the next couple of months we have some nice documents so that we can officially begin a capital campaign. That is going much slower than we thought, but we're okay with it because of the the cost to construct right now in Reno Sparks. We're, even if the project's delayed a year or more, we might get a much better building if we are patient. So that's the capital update. I also want to say that at one of our next meetings, we did a redo of our EMSI MC Economic Impact Study. We think you'll be impressed. We'll schedule that for next meeting. And now I'll very quickly turn to the presentation that, had I done this, if we had more time, it would have been about 10 minutes. I'm going to make it about 2, but if I could have the PowerPoint go to there, Lisa, that would be helpful. When former friend, colleague, Cliff Macklin, prior to his very unexpected and sad passing, Cliff and I had a couple of 2-hour conversations. And it was at that time that we scheduled this agenda item. And the agenda item is, what is the role of the TMCC IAC? Where are we, and how do we move TMCC forward? And I might cover this in more detail at another meeting if you would like, but since we had a lot of new members, this is sort of the history and the role of the IAC. And you can see that it started as a legislative push to try to deepen the connection between the communities and the Board of Regents that community colleges serve. And so that's why the topic on co-requisite was before you today, because not only do you help us with workforce directions, but you're also helping us with curriculum, with educational direction, and with impacts on communities of learners. And so it is a very important role. But because we're out of time, I think that's all I will say about that. And if you're comfortable, we will go ahead and cover that in more detail at another meeting, especially for those of you who are new enough not to be aware of your defined statutorily purpose as an IAC member. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. And now if we could go to the agenda item originally number 7, where Vice Chancellor Nate McKinnon will provide an update on his part. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nate McKinnon for the record. Excited to be here with you today, and thank you for the very robust discussion this morning. And this is really important stuff, so really appreciate the opportunity for you as council members to learn about the types of policy debates and have an opportunity to ponder them with us at the system office. So appreciate your time for that. Just a couple of quick announcements. First of all, since the last meeting of the TMCC Institutional Advisory Council, we've got a new chair of the Community College Committee, and that is none other than Regent Carol Del Carlo, and we are very excited for that. So we give her a round of applause, please. Regent Del Carlo has also been a rock star in terms of appearance at not only your IAC, but other IACs as well, and we really appreciate that and hope that you do as well. I want to make sure everyone's aware that we've had some personnel changes in the area of community colleges at the system office. In particular, Frank Woodbeck, who was the Executive Director for Workforce Development in my division, has taken a position with the College of Southern Nevada as their Executive Director for Grants and Special Projects, working directly for President Federico Zaragoza at CSN. That's fantastic for Frank and CSN, not so fantastic for me or NSHE, but we're very excited for Frank, and he started that job in March. We are currently searching for a new Assistant Vice Chancellor for Workforce Development, and that position is posted, Workforce Development and Community Colleges, and that position is posted right now. If you know of interested candidates, please make sure you tell them to check out the NSHE website as soon as possible. I think review of applications begins late next week, so still some time there if you know of anyone. I also just want to quickly mention the MGM College Opportunity Program. This is a program with MGM whereby they are paying for their employees who are eligible that want to attend one of our institutions in an online-only program. They are entirely paying for the cost necessary for those individual students. And I'm pleased to report that we had about 1,200 MGM employees raise their hand and be approved as eligible by MGM. The majority of those students are looking to attend CSN or UNLV, and I think that's not too surprising, given that more than, I think, close to 65% of MGM's nationwide employees are located in Clark County. And so the name recognition alone helps with that. And but in the long run, we hope to actually revisit the way we present our programs to the MGM employees to better help them with their first degree choice and second institution. And so I'm also pleased to report, though, that 2/3 of those 1,200 don't yet have a bachelor's degree. So they're looking for either a certificate, an associate's, or a bachelor's degree, which is just fantastic from the perspective of upward mobility for the state of Nevada. The Nevada Promise program continues to do very well, and congratulations to TMCC for having an uptick in the number of students who remain eligible after the April 30th was a big deadline for those students to complete their community service, their mentor meetings, their trainings, complete their FAFSA, all financial aid paperwork. Next thing they have to do is simply enroll in classes. And I believe the numbers for TMCC are up nearly 100 students from where they were last year, which I haven't gotten all the data yet, but I would speculate is one of the highest in our system, if not the highest, in terms of year over year. So great work to the Nevada Promise team here at TMCC. I think that's really and then the last thing I want to make sure we mentioned, but Theo actually mentioned it, I just wanted to make sure you're aware of it, is the board is also contemplating an important policy decision on mandating advising for first-year students. This is so important. We know this. We use the term that self-advising is self-destruction. Nothing could be, more accurate. And I think we have students who, even if they meet with an advisor the first time around, think they can do it on their own later on and make mistakes. I teach as an adjunct at TMCC. I teach Introduction to American Government, and I have a student in my class right now, and she's doing great because this is kind of her second time around, because the first time she picked a course that didn't quite have all of the pieces that should have been in this course. She took a different political science course, and I said, "How did you do that?" I said, "Did you talk to an advisor?" She said, "No, I just self-registered for it." And so, there's so many examples of that occur across our system, so we're so excited to see the push from our institutions, but I think TMCC is in a very good spot already for that. Some of our other institutions have a much bigger hill to climb to be able to meet the requirement of mandating advising, but it is so important for all students, and we're excited about that. And in the sake of time, I'll stop there, Madam Chair, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to
relative
give well, first of all, 100% behind advising, yay. But second of all, I wanted to give a TMCC MGM update. The last that I was told, I think it was about a week ago, we have 8 MGM students that are in state, 16 from out of state. Unfortunately, the out of state ones, we will not get state funding for those, and that is at a tuition discount of 10%. So we are concerned that we are subsidizing out of state students, which might be okay if there's open spots available in some of the programs they want. But we're very happy about the 8 that are coming to us at a tuition discount, because MGM negotiated about a 10%, so small discount, but they will be state funded. We are concerned also that the online co-requisite math policy could end up affecting those students and how they navigate that, especially in an environment that's online, because they also will be subject to a gateway co-requisite policy, and how all of that affects online is something we haven't had time to delve into, but we are concerned.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, we're going to move on to agenda item number 10, and that is new business. So if there is anything that any member of the council would like to bring up at this time to be added to the next meeting agenda relative to new business, you're welcome to do so. Anyone have any recommendations? Okay, seeing none, I will move on to agenda item number 11. If there are any final comments about what you've taken away from today's meeting, or any things you would like to share with the group that you feel would be helpful, this is your opportunity. So anyone else have any closing comments, questions, takeaways that they'd like to add to?
I'd like
this
to,
discussion? Thank you,
Madam Vice Chair, if I could. Again, Deborah, Byersdorf, Washington County School District, and I too appreciated the dialogue, the debate that I heard earlier about the co-requisite requisite policy. I want to give a shout out to your team here at TMCC. Remediation is a tough thing. It's something that we grapple with in K-12. And boy, I could go on about all the challenges that we face. Unintended consequences, I think, was one of the bullet points you had up there. But thank you to your team, because I know in my time here on this council, my time in the Washoe County School District, the partnership that we have with TMCC, and I think in the understanding, no two students are the same and their needs. So thank you for that. I'm going to embarrass him a little bit and how proud I am with Theo Meek. I was Theo's high school principal. A number of years ago, and I appreciate his passion and the work that he put in his short time in his position. I have thoughts on that, and I was kind of sitting here thinking that I had been invited to a dinner party where the hosts had engaged in a previous conversation that I wasn't privy to as I was trying to catch up with the conversation. So anyways, I hope NSHE, TMCC, I hope you work together and you find some kind of blended solution, because one size does not fit all. And I don't think that's what anybody was intending to bring forward today. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
BJ North, for the record. I just want to thank NSHE for coming and all the work that both the TMCC team and that you have done. And I hope that you will continue to have dialogue, as Crystal mentioned, that this is an ongoing process, and there's a lot at stake here, and those are the students, but the community, and it's critical. The decisions that you make today has a huge impact, and I could tell you about workforce that are in our bank, and the people that we touch, and all of the other people that are out there that are trying to change their lives, and they start here. So I just would hope that we continue to have dialogue, that we both listen on both sides, and we work together for the best outcome. And I would hope that we're not always focused on graduation rates, but we focus on success of students, elevating community, and quality of life for everyone that we touch. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Sash Komori for the record. Once again, two things. I'm truly impressed with the work that you guys are doing. I talk to people outside in the community who are engaged with TMCC and to UNR, and there's a lot of pride in belonging to community and being part of the services that are here in the society. And they're extremely proud of what they've been able to accomplish through the services that you guys provide. It's also very encouraging that NSHE is out here. Rather than make policy in vacuum, they're actually discussing, and hopefully over the next year or 2 years, we'll have a policy that works for everyone. Again, it's a tough problem. I don't think there is a solution that is going to work. All we need to find something that's going to work for us here. And again, one thing that's true is change is constant. That's the only thing. And whatever we figure out right now, I'll bet you in under 5-6 years, we'll be back to square one saying, oh, things have changed, what we need to do. So it's good that we're having this discussion, and I know it's not easy pulling together all the numbers. Irrespective of whether we like it or not, numbers are numbers. They tell what they tell, and we can't argue with them. What we need to do is we need to take from that numbers, and in 5 months putting together something like that is not easy, believe me. So what we need to do is we need to look at others, see what's working for them, and then we need to modify it to figure out what works for us, and then go ahead and do it, and with the idea that, or the knowledge that it may or may not work, and we need to be open to the possibility. And again, rather than coming back to the same thing, rather than count on graduation rates, we need to see what the net impact on the community has been, both short-term and long-term, and keep learning from it. So But I appreciate you guys coming and appreciate the partnership.
Thank you, Councilmember Kamuri. So at this stage, we need to move to agenda item number 12, which is public comment. Public comment will be taken during this agenda item. No action may be taken on a matter raised under this item until the matter is included on an agenda as an item on which action may be taken. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes per person. Persons making comment will be asked to begin by stating their name for the record and to spell their last name. The council chair may elect to allow additional public comment on a specific agenda item when that agenda item is being considered. At this point, do we have any public comment?
I just want to say thank you to all of you as a guest to this committee. This has been a wonderful opportunity. I absolutely agree that it's refreshing to hear perspectives, especially from our community, that are externalities, unfortunate externalities sometimes to these conversations. And I appreciate you all being here today and listening in on some of these challenges, providing your feedback. As you all have heard, this is an incredibly difficult conversation. And I'm just, again, appreciative of Dr. Hilgerson for inviting us. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And before we adjourn, I would like to share with the Council that BJ North is interested in and willing to serve as the chair of the TMCC IAC, and we will include a conversation about that in our next meeting, and anyone else who may be interested in this position can contact Dr. Hilgerson and advise them of such. So did you have some closing to say? I got it in my notes, so yes.
Although I do want to thank you for doing a wonderful job stepping in your role as vice chair. Thank you
very much. Regent Del Carlo.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to say I'm not part of this, but I'm here as a guest, so public comment's my place. I truly appreciate this conversation. We are having robust discussions at all levels, at all institutions on this topic, and I don't have a huge background in education, but I'll tell you, I have learned so much. My business is background, but I'm a native Nevadan, and I know that the education numbers in Nevada are horrible. And it's embarrassing. It truly is embarrassing from every viewpoint. So we really have nowhere to go but up. And I am truly believe, with my business background, I believe in data-driven research and follow what the numbers tell us, because there's a reason the numbers tell us which way to go. And if we can use that, and I truly believe you here at TMCC really, truly care about these students, and you're very passionate. We've got to follow the numbers. Everything I'm looking at shows that co-requisite model as the way to go, and we'll have, I know, a robust conversation at our June board meeting. We do have 2 years is a good thing. We have 2 years to implement this, so things can be tried and experimented on in the next 2 years. But I mean, just looking at the data, graduation rate to me as a regent is important, because why are you going to higher ed degree seeking if you're not going to complete? Yes, life does get in the way, but our new Nevada and our new economy, we need people with degrees. We need them with certificates. That's so important. So thank you for the discussion today. And then I'm glad you're going to postpone the future conversation of the IAC as the new chairman of the Community College Committee. One of the concerns has been that we don't ever have any action items. And are the IACs fulfilling the true role they were intended to serve? Or do we need to adjust? Or, we just want to really look at that for all 4 institutions and then go from there. So I'm always available. Invite me to anything you think I need to see. I appreciate going out and going on tours. I've been through ClickBond. I was so impressed with that. Recently, I was at the prison down in Carson City, the medium security prison. But I really learn a lot when I go out, and I'm very hands-on. So thank you so much, because people that are here on this IAC are your volunteers, almost like I am, and I appreciate the time you take to better Nevada and be here for students. So have a great day and weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Holmes, did you have a quick?
Mike Holmes, I just
closing
wanted to take a point of privilege and introduce my successor because my tenure as faculty senate chair is coming to a close here in a month. But Professor Ann Flesher from the math department is the new incoming faculty senate chair, so you'll see her.
Good.
And she helped put this thing together. From a faculty senate standpoint, we formed an ad hoc committee to do a thorough vetting and analysis of all the impacts and the considerations for the co-rec and the remedial policy, which I think is integral from an institutional perspective. And her obligations this morning as a mother for Mother's Day caused her to be here just in time for her part in this presentation.
Yes.
So.
Yes, extending Happy Mother's Day to every mother in the room. And with that, I think we will adjourn. Thank you for the passion and the data and all of the great conversation. The meeting is hereby adjourned.
Thank you.